Take 2 showers tomorrow. Shower is the ultimate idea place.
Yeah, Marco's a little grumbly tonight, but I can understand.
Oh, gee, yeah. C is kicking my butt right now, and audio math is kicking my butt right now.
So what are you trying to accomplish? And use very small words, because I am not familiar with audio stuff at all.
Okay, so in audio terms, I'm trying to implement a look-ahead limiter. You know, you probably know as a podcaster and as a video person that clipping is real bad.
I've heard this.
When your audio level goes above the maximum input level of a digital input device, it sounds really bad. It sounds like a scratchy, loud, kind of like kind of thing. Like it sounds awful. So it's very important when you're dealing with audio amplification, when you're trying to make volume levels louder or whatever else. It's very important to have a limiter in front of it. And the point of the limiter is to catch those like very loud signals that would clip before they clip, and to apply gain downwards on them.
Wait, so hold on. So to use kind of a really crummy analogy, so this is like I have my finger on the volume dial. I know it's not quite volume, but for the sake of the analogy, I have my hand on the volume dial, and I see the person in front of the microphone take a real deep breath and like get ready to shout. And I go, oh crap. And I turn the volume down because I know they're about to shout.
Well, that's the look ahead part, but I haven't gotten to that yet. So the main part is they start shouting, and as they get really close to the top, you very quickly go, oh crap, this is going to clip, and you turn the volume down.
Okay.
Now, you might think like the naive way to try to implement this is basically you just look at every sample, and the ones that are above 1 in the floating point domain, so like the ones that are above 1.0, which is like the ceiling, you just like compress those down by a certain multiplier, or you just make them 1.0. You might think to do it that way, but that ends up sounding awful because of the way signals work. That basically introduces a bunch of frequencies and distortion that weren't there before. And so the right way to do it is to catch it well in advance of it actually clipping. Like, you know, enough samples in advance that you can actually do almost like a gradual volume ramp downwards. And if you ever seen, you know, if you're ever like using an audio editing program and you're playing with the controls of either a compressor, which is basically a limiter with some extra stuff, or a limiter, then you will see something called attack time and release time. And these are literally like the amount of time, usually measured in like tens of milliseconds or maybe hundreds of milliseconds at worst, the amount of time that it will take to turn the volume down to prevent clipping. And then that's the attack time. And the release time is the amount of time it takes to go back to normal, to basically turn the volume back to normal after it thinks that the clipping sound is over. What you want to do is ideally to really prevent something from clipping, you need to have look ahead, which means you need to be able to look to see what's coming in the stream before you apply the volume dip to limit it from clipping. So what I've been doing, and you know, so you know, programmers, you know, you can figure out like when you're dealing with some kind of like rolling buffer with like look ahead functionality, but you can't modify the stuff in the look ahead buffer yet. Like it's kind of awkward, and so I basically spent yesterday building the framework to do look ahead processing, and then I spent today trying and largely failing to write the gain processing that will gradually, in response to what's coming up ahead, will gradually raise and lower the volume in a way that doesn't sound horrible and that actually works to prevent clipping. And I've just been having a terrible time. My brain is melted right now. Like it takes me a long time to understand complex math, like, you know, anything involving signal processing, filters. Like I barely understand that stuff because I'm really not good at that kind of advanced math. I have very little knowledge of it and very little background in it. But the limiter I thought would be easy because I thought like, oh, it's just like, you know, you basically like ramp up and down the gain in response to what you see ahead of you. And yeah, it's kicking my butt. It's not easy at all. And of course, because I'm working in C, I am frequently like having these comical errors where like, you know, I love working in C. C was kind of like my programming youth, and I really enjoyed it, and my first job was all in C, so I do love C on a very like intellectual level. But it is awfully funny when like, you know, you get an error where like, oh, the thing that worked like last build, in this build it's making random noise all over the place. Well, I screwed up on memory somewhere. And you just got to find, like, where is the somewhere? Like, somewhere I made a mistake and I'm writing all over garbage somewhere. And yeah, it's, oh boy. So I've had a number of those times, and I've had a lot of terrible luck trying to implement my limiter, but getting there slowly.
Now, why C? Speed? Because the API you're using is C, all of the above, some of the above?
The API, I'm actually not dealing directly with core audio at this level. I'm dealing just with, like, float arrays, like just like giant buffers of floats that are sample data. So I could be writing this in pretty much anything that can operate on raw buffers. When I write code at this level, I make extensive use of the Accelerate framework with all the VDSP functions. This is basically Apple's like wrapper functions around highly vectorized optimizations for common math operations and this kind of thing. So like if you want to like take an array of 500 numbers and multiply them all by the same value, or multiply two giant arrays of 500 numbers by each other and put the result in a third array of 500 numbers, using these functions in the Accelerate framework are way, way, way faster because they use vector operations on the processor. It's way faster than like going through one by one and doing these operations. So basically I'm dealing with a whole bunch of raw float arrays and a whole bunch of calls to these low-level functions and everything. And so you can do this in Swift, but Swift is such a royal pain in the butt doing things like this.
Sure. And why not Objective-C then?
This library, I really just write in C for speed. Like, this is, so in this audio pipeline is the only time I have ever had a measurable improvement by removing an Objective-C message send.
Wow.
Like, I actually, like, back when I was doing that battery testing, when I was, like, running out the batteries on all my devices, seeing, like, oh, does the speaker use all the battery? Does the Bluetooth use all the battery? So I discovered this optimization where, like, there was this one call that basically renders out a block of, like, 500 samples of audio in the audio pipeline. And so it's called, you know, there's 44,100 samples per second. So the block that renders 500 at a time is called many times per second. And by removing an Objective-C message send from that, I was able to actually speed up the processing by some amount, like, you know, a couple percent, but it was measurable and it was reliably measurable.
That's surprising. So what is the ultimate driving motivation behind this, if you're willing to share?
So I'm working on Voice Boost 2. I've talked about this a few times here and there, like just kind of mentioning here and there. And basically, I'm trying to do Voice Boost, but better. One of the reasons I'm doing it now is because if I want to support AirPlay 2 in a way that isn't horrible, I really need to write my own Voice Boost code. Instead of right now, Voice Boost is implemented as a combination of legacy AU graph nodes, like audio graph nodes from Core Audio. And that API seems to, like, it's very discouraged to use that now. And it seems like Apple is slowly showing at the door. And using those to supply an AirPlay 2 stream is possible, but it would be very clumsy. I'd basically have to like create a whole audio graph like off to the side that isn't connected to the hardware, render with it into a voice or into a AirPlay 2 style renderer, and like so it's just a lot of overhead. It's a lot of extra work, and that would probably have a noticeable battery cost. So I don't want to do it that way if I don't have to. So the way I want to do it is by not needing those old AU graph processing nodes anymore, which means that I have to write my own compressor. And the way you write a compressor is you write a limiter first. And so I need the limiter for lots of different things in audio processing things. But the very first thing I need it for is the Voice Boost 2 compressor that I'm writing from scratch. And this is probably not wise, but I just spent like a month dealing with just like pain in the butt watch things, like not the fun part of app development, but just like pain in the butt, like, oh, this watch transfer just failed for no reason. How do I fix that? How do I try to work around that? And going through like, so Overcast 503 just came out a couple days ago, and this included basically what I'm talking about, like the fix for watch transfers. This was a grueling process where to figure out why standalone watch podcast transfers were so unreliable, I basically spent the last few weeks like shipping a beta build almost every day, with different tweaks and changes. I built a whole logging framework so the watch would log what it's doing and coordinate it with the phone app and log what it's doing, and then people in the beta could then send me those logs so I could look at them and make tweaks and send out new builds the next day or later that same day. And it was just a grueling, long process of trying to finally figure out how to make watch transfers even remotely reliable. And so I'm rewarding myself with that long slog of doing something I really didn't want to do that's very boring.
With a bunch of C.
Well, yeah, because it's different, It's like, I know it sounds crazy. But like,
it does sound crazy, but
this is something I've been putting off for a year. And parts of it have taken me a year to figure out even how to do. Because as I mentioned, like this involves a lot of like DSP stuff that I do not have a background in, that I mostly don't know. Like whenever I stumble upon like an academic paper online that tells me how to do something, and it starts putting in like the big Greek like sigma symbols and everything. I don't know how to do even that stuff. Like I don't know how to even read mathematic notation beyond like basic stuff. And when they start talking about things like FIR filters and everything, I don't have any clue about that stuff. Like that's way above my head. And so it's taken me a very long time to figure out how to do this kind of stuff. But I have figured out enough of it to get by on some low levels. And so I actually find this really fascinating and interesting, and it's a very good intellectual challenge, and it's working towards something I really, really want to get done that will be very satisfying to me, that most people won't care about at all. All of this is going to go into a little checkbox that says AirPlay 2, like a little bullet point feature on one release. Now supports AirPlay 2. But if I can get this down, I can then also use this to build more interesting stuff. So that's my main goal here. I couldn't care less about your HomePod. I want to build more interesting stuff. So I want to do AirPlay 2 first to get me to build the building blocks, and then I can do interesting stuff with that. So that's where I am now, and I actually find this to be a wonderful change of pace from fighting watch connectivity and transfers. This actually feels, even though this is way like harder math-wise and way lower level, this feels more satisfying to me because I feel like I'm not cleaning up some mess. I feel like I'm actually building something. And that's something you don't get very often in programming, and you got to really enjoy it when you do.
Not to spoil your fun, but did you check to see if there are any libraries that already do this, like open source libraries?
There might be some that are like really part of something bigger, like the what's that audio program? Not Audacity. Oh yeah, Audacity. Like Audacity is an open source audio editor that has things like limiters and compressors in it. I could look at their code and steal it. I don't want to do that though. And it's probably hard to port some of that stuff over. What I'm really looking for is like descriptions of like algorithms to do these kinds of things, and those are actually few and far between. Most online code that you would find would do this either as like a MATLAB function, which I don't know what to do with, or they're doing it. They're just going to call the core audio units. That I know how to use audio units already. I'm trying to do this without using audio units. So here we are.
To go back a half step, do you have any findings that you're willing to share with regard to watch-related things? Like, was there some head-slapping moment where you were doing something silly and that's what caused the problems, or is this considered trade information?
The main problem I had with the watch, so the watch app can wake up the phone app in the background whenever it wants. Like whenever the watch app is running or is updating itself, if the watch app is running, it can send a message to the phone app, and the phone app will wake up if it's in the background. But it doesn't work the other way around. The phone app cannot wake up the watch app on demand. So the phone app, like if you get a new download into your phone, the phone can't send that immediately to the watch. It has to wait for the next time the watch app checks in. And the watch app can check in really, really pretty rarely. It's if you have it configured as a complication, it gets maybe every 15 minutes worth of check-ins. If it's not a complication and you just have it on the watch, it gets a lot less time than that. Each one of those check-ins, it can only be alive for like 2 seconds before the system puts it back in the background. And if at any point you violate any of these limits from the watch app side, your app gets killed, and then it doesn't come back for a while. So I had many problems. Part of my problems were I was exhausting some of these resource limits because some things in the watch were just taking too much computation that I was doing, and so it was getting killed in the background a lot. So it was not refreshing very often. And more problems. There were so many problems. Like there were a couple of race conditions with like the watch app would start up and send a sync message to the phone app, and then receive some files the phone app had sent in the background, because watch connectivity does not guarantee the order of things you send, whether some of them are background or not. It's very, very weird. And so there were some weird race conditions. There were some concurrency bugs. There were some crashes that were sometimes my fault, sometimes being related to resource terminations. And I had a system before where the phone app would try to communicate with the watch app proactively. So even if the watch app wasn't running, and I said it earlier, the phone app can't wake it up, the phone app was trying to say, you know what, this episode just came in, let me just create a watch file transfer and just tell it to start. And then next time the watch comes around, or next time the systems feel like it can maybe get that transfer, and hopefully sometime the watch app will be woken up and it can receive that. So I was basically proactively creating transfers on the phone. This meant the phone had to keep track of what the watch had, so the phone would know what was new and what needed to be sent to the watch. This worked somewhat, but created a bunch of weird edge case problems. Problem number one was if you have more than one watch, this totally breaks. Because if you have more than one watch, then every time a watch checks in with the phone, first of all, if you have just changed watches, all background transfers get killed and invalidated, and you have to start them over. So if you wear multiple watches, this is one thing that suffers. And then also then you have two different sets of what you might have, and so the phone can get confused about what the watch has, and it can send duplicate things. Some of those race conditions also resulted in duplicate sends, where like the phone would tell, or the watch would tell the phone, all right, I have numbers 1, 2, and 3. And the phone would say, all right, I'll send you number 4. And then right after the watch said, I have numbers 1, 2, and 3, watch connectivity delivered in the background number 4. That was sitting there waiting for it, but it just hadn't delivered it right on launch. So then it actually already had number 4. And then the phone is resending it because at the time the phone got the sync message, it thought it didn't have it. So there's all sorts of weird little like race conditions and various concurrency issues that just took me a very long time to figure out and fix. And my solution at the end was basically stop doing anything proactively on the phone. The phone no longer keeps track of what's on the watch except for a very basic display function of like displaying how much free space you have in the setting screen. That's it. Now, every time the watch syncs with the phone, it tells it I have, episodes number 1, 2, and 3 or whatever, and the phone, in response to that, will create any necessary transfers to send new stuff to the watch. That way, you can have 10 watches paired, and it'll basically work. Like it'll still suck for other reasons, but it'll basically work because then like each watch is only getting what is sent in response to it. This ends up working way more reliably, and it eliminates duplicate transfers almost 100% of the time, which dramatically improves things. The only downside to it is that the delay between when your phone downloads a new episode and when that episode shows up on the watch may be longer in many cases, because it has to wait. Like, so the phone can download it, and then it has to wait until next time the watch checks in before it even starts the transfer to the watch. But every other way I tried doing things was very, very buggy and very, it would destroy people's batteries and everything, and it would make a lot of duplicates, and transfers would get all bogged down in watch connectivity, which is a very buggy framework, and because I was just sending too many messages proactively in the background, it would just take forever. Like it was so problematic to do the proactive method. So this way of basically doing everything in response to something is way more effective, way faster. At the actual transfers, and then just has the downside of like there's that latency between when new stuff arrives and when the watch can get it.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, so that in response to all that, I needed to do something productive, and that's why I'm writing my own look-ahead limiter. Damn it!
Whatever makes you happy.
By the way, if anybody knows how to write a look-ahead limiter, let me know.
Yeah, that is intense.
Oh, jeez, I almost got it. Like I have the look-ahead part. I have that done. It's just a question of like responding to the changes in like attenuation in a smooth and also accurate way. Because in theory, like if you have a look ahead of say 10 milliseconds and your attack time is 10 milliseconds, in theory it should be impossible to ever clip. Like the output should never be clipped then. But I'm not having that kind of outcome yet. So here we are.
Well, good luck. I'm sure that's just a boatload of fun.
Honestly, much of it is. Yesterday was a lot of fun, like putting together all the look-ahead stuff and doing some more voice boost coding. Like that yesterday, I had a lot of fun and I got a lot done. It was very productive. Today has been one of those like banging my head against the wall days.
Do you have a separate little project where you're working on this part? Like, are you doing the audio processing not in Overcast, but in like just a separate framework project, or like just off to the side?
I have a Mac command line utility that I develop all this in, so that way, like I just hit build, and I don't have to wait for the simulator. I don't have to wait for any devices. Like I just hit build, and I run it from the command line with command line arguments of files I have in my Mac to test with, and it's like here's an input file, here's an output file. So not only is it way faster of like a build and run and debug cycle, but also then I can supply it whatever input file I want, and then I can open the result up in Adobe Audition, which is like this very sophisticated wave editor, and I can look and see exactly what I output like at the wave level, and just see like is this working right? And I can listen to it. I can like on my big headphones and everything. So it's all to make it a lot easier. And then, but I'm working on a framework that is shared with Overcast, and so that way, like once I figure it out in this Mac utility, I can just bring it over.
Just FYI, the faster code debug cycle is another reason a lot of people like unit tests when developing an isolated piece of functionality.
I love you, John. Oh, my word, I love you. In this case, I don't know that
you can still do it. Testing could still be a part of it if you knew for example, if you knew what the numbers were supposed to look like, if you knew what you wanted the samples to look like in the stream, right? But you're doing it sort of the more visual way of like make a file, chuck it into an editor, and look at it, and whatever.
I also spend a lot of time in the debugger. Like that's like basically the debugger is my test suite. Like I just hit a breakpoint right after. Like it's like I know what this is supposed to be.
That's an under the radar title. If under the radar had titles, the debugger is my test suite.
Also, you can still run the debugger with unit tests. Like that's still a thing. Don't worry.
Tell you what though, like as an iOS developer, the vast majority of the time, doing something like this where it's just a Mac binary is so refreshing in a few ways. Like,
yes,
it's just so,
I've been there.
It's so damn easy and fast, and there's so much less to deal with. It's really nice.
I hear you. No, I feel like I don't want to pull on the unit testing thread anymore, but I feel like unit testing is one of those things that you're going to come to in your own time for some ridiculous reason, and then you're going to say to John and me, hopefully me, if not both of us, unit testing is actually really convenient.
That's a pretty long infinite timeline argument. Given the current rate of change, pretty optimistic.
Yeah, I would not bet that I would be arriving at that point anytime. Like I think I will be retired from programming before I arrive at that point.
Yeah, you got to start working on Adam, Casey.
Yeah, there you go. Maybe you have a chance with that.
Adam will be heavily into test-driven development.
Oh, I didn't say test-driven development. I'm not a monster. I mean, come on.
We are sponsored this week by Away. For $20 off your suitcase, visit awaytravel.com/ATP and use promo code ATP during checkout. Away, quite simply, makes really nice suitcases at a really great value. So they use high-quality materials. This is made from premium German polycarbonate, unrivaled in strength and impact resistance, and very lightweight. And they're incredibly well designed, too. They're practically designed and smartly designed. They have an interior with a patent-pending compression system, so you can fit a bunch of stuff in there. Of course, they have 4 spinner wheels. They have a TSA-approved combination lock. They have a removable, washable laundry bag, so you can keep your dirty clothes separate from your clean clothes as you travel. And then when you come home, you can just dump out that bag into your washing machine. It's really a very well-designed thing. And they have all these different sizes now. They started out with the one that you might have heard of, the carry-on. They've also now made the bigger carry-on, the medium, and the large, and these come in all sorts of different colors. And the carry-ons have a built-in USB battery, so you can even charge your phone as you're sitting around waiting, like at the gate at the airport. You can keep your phone charged with the built-in USB battery, and when they tell you to remove it, if they have to gate check it, it's really easy to just pop it right out to remove it. All of this is backed by a lifetime warranty. If anything breaks, they will fix or replace it for you for life. And you can see for yourself how good it is by taking advantage of their 100-day trial and free shipping within the lower 48 states of the U.S. You can try it for up to 100 days, and this, of course, means you can travel with it. If at any point you decide you don't want it, you can return it for a full refund with no questions asked. So check it out today at awaytravel.com/ATP and use promo code ATP during checkout for $20 off a suitcase. Once again, awaytravel.com/ATP, code ATP for $20 off a suitcase. Thank you so much to Away for sponsoring our show.
All right, let's start with some follow-up. You're welcome, world. I think we can comfortably say that it was only the three of us that got Apple to update its bagel emoji. And now it mostly looks okay. There's still room, but it's better than it was.
Oh, it's way better.
Let's say this. Yeah, definitely. The main thing you can say about it is it is an improvement. I mean, how could it be worse, really? But it is an improvement for sure. There are things to be said about it, but put it this way: if I squint or move away from these big images or whatever, one is immediately identifiable as that's supposed to be a bagel, and the other one still looks vaguely donut-like. So success on, if you look at this and tell me what it is, you can say it's a bagel. If you look at the details, you can nitpick them, but as other people have pointed out, you look at the details of almost any emoji and there's some ridiculous stuff in there. But like the key test that it has to pass is, what is this? And if some percentage of people say donut, it's a failure. So thumbs up, it now looks like, it is now identifiable as a bagel, albeit a very strange pale bagel that's semi-toasted with plastic cream cheese on it. Whatever. It's going to be small. It'll be fine.
Well, and like, the point of emoji is not to look photorealistic. Like it's an art style that on some level, and this varies depending on the vendor, but like it always looks a little bit cartoony because they're being displayed in text in very, very small sizes most of the time. And so like to have something look totally photorealistic will just kind of look weird. So the style they're in is, and honestly, I think Apple's current style is actually more photorealistic than it needs to be.
Yeah, for sure. I was going to say it's very close to, again, potentially uncanny valley. It's stylized for sure, but it is very much more photorealistic than most other emoji I've seen.
Ultimately, this is a much better bagel. It is more realistic than I expected it to be, and it's like I don't have any more complaints about it. Basically, like I do think that
I do.
No, like so okay. So like they made like the little butt crack seam more prominent, and so it's more easily identified as a bagel that way. The hole to circle ratio and shape are better. They better reflect actual like New York style bagels, and the cream cheese, while I don't love the like perfect way it was applied there, I do recognize this is a cartoon, right? And so like it is supposed to be that way, and also the cream cheese hides the texture of the the horrible bread texture it had before, which appears to still be under it, but we don't really see it anymore. So ultimately, and the color of the dough has been tweaked to be, I think, a lot better, much closer to a real bagel. So ultimately, my main complaint about it, which admittedly is a very minor complaint, is that a plain bagel with plain cream cheese is such a waste. Like, you have two opportunities there to have interesting flavors in the bagel and in the cream cheese. And I understand if maybe you want to just take one of those. Like, an everything bagel with plain cream cheese is really good. Or a plain bagel with like some kind of really outrageous cream cheese, like like a really strong vegetable or scallion or something, like that can be good too. But to have a plain bagel and plain cream cheese is just it's a waste of carbs.
It's not a waste. It's fine. It's like plain cheese pizza. Like,
yep,
it's not the thing you want all the time, and other things can be more exciting.
Plain cheese pizza is way better than a plain bagel with plain cream cheese.
Not if it's done well.
No, sir.
I feel like
no,
not if it's done well. Like simple, it can be done well. So a couple of not that we're going to go through all this all again, but a couple of my complaints about this bagel. The bottom half, like they hid the texture of the cut inside, so they don't have to worry about that for the most part anymore. But it looks kind of like it's like toasted or stale. Like it's the parts that are sticking out of the wrong color. But the main thing you already touched on is the cream cheese. First of all, I think it looks like plastic or wall spackle or something. It doesn't read as cream cheese. Second, the way it's and again, this is all ridiculous stuff that you could only see if it's giant size. At small sizes, it's fine. But even maybe at small sizes, you can notice it's like there is no bagel ever made in the history of the universe that had the cream cheese put on it so that there's a tiny thin rim of bagel visible uniformly around the outside of it. Like it's basically impossible to do that unless you custom made a machine. If I saw a bagel like that, I'd know I was in like Dreamscape with Dennis Quaid. Like, this is not reality. Look at this cream cheese in this bagel. This would never exist in the real world. This must be a dream. It's bad. Anyway, it's vastly improved.
If you scroll down in this article on Emojipedia about the bagel update, and you can see the list of everyone else's bagel emoji, like Google, Microsoft, Samsung, Twitter. What the heck flavor is the Twitter bagel?
It looks like a hamburger. That's not even a bagel.
Yeah, seriously.
So the Twitter bagel, it has...
It looks like a sphere with a hole down the center.
Yeah, so shape-wise, I can kind of forgive the shape. If that's their style, I mean...
I can't. It looks like the Death Star.
It does look like the Death Star.
It actually kind of does. But, and so it's like, it's clearly illustrating a bagel with cream cheese, and the bagel has 5 very large seeds on it, and like they're like the size of like almonds. And then the color of the bagel, it's almost red. It's like a low saturation, like dusty reddish brown. And I have never seen. Look, I used to work in a bagel shop, and I've eaten a lot of bagels since then. I have never seen a bagel that was anywhere near this color in any flavor in any bagel shop anywhere.
You don't have red velvet bagels mixed with blueberry all the time?
or shaped. Like, it's not even bagel shaped. It is literally sphere shaped with a cylindrical hole cut down the center of it. It looks more like a weird cream filled donut ball.
Yeah, it really does.
It's by far the worst one.
I don't think Microsoft's or Google's are particularly good. In fact, I think outside of Apple's, I think Samsung's is actually my favorite of this batch.
Yeah, Samsung's is the clear second place. Well, I don't know. Google's isn't bad. I mean, identifiable as a bagel. Like, you wouldn't. They put the sesame seeds on it. What else? It's not a donut.
Well, Google's has a couple of critical errors. So number one is like the perspective between the seam between the cream cheese and the top bagel half on the far left and right is weird. It has like the wrong perspective. Like,
it's overflowing. That's what they're trying to get at.
But the bagel's like weirdly behind it. It's not the right angle. And then second of all, the way the seeds are distributed, it's as if the side of the bagel that is not facing you has no seeds on it.
Yeah, it's nonsensical.
Yeah, like I feel like Apple's looks pretty good now. Twitter's is good for comedy value. I don't know what's going on in Microsoft land with those black outlines. It's probably just their style. And Samsung's looks like a legitimate Lender's freezer bagel. Like that, Samsung did a really good job of showing what a Lender's bagel looks like.
Theirs looks a little donut-like too. Apple's is clearly the best in this bunch now.
Yeah.
So it's not even a contest.
All I know is you're welcome, world. John, tell me about screen time and how everyone's having problems with it.
Yep, I complained about screen time as a feature I was using, and then it just stopped working. I could no longer see my kids' screen time reports on my phone, and a million people wrote in to say, yep, I'm having exactly the same problem. I tried disabling screen time for the people and, remove like the big reset, which was a terrible mistake because Apple in their infinite wisdom has decided if you turn it off for somebody and then turn it back on, it has no recollection of what your settings were. It's like, so you're starting from scratch again, and there are a lot of settings. So once I did that once, I'm like, well, even if this fixed the problem, I wouldn't go through it again because it's ridiculous. So as a warning to anyone who's thinking of trying that, A, it didn't fix the problem, and B, it makes you redo all of the settings. I hope you remembered what they all were. But yeah, everyone's like, yeah, it was working for me, now it's not, or whatever. One person did say that supposedly in the 12.1 beta it's fixed. I'm not on the beta, so I'll just wait patiently for 12.1 to come out and hope it fixes my problem. But if it's happening to you, you are not alone.
All righty. Let's see what's next. Tell me about emergency bypass.
We talked about Do Not Disturb. I was a big proponent of setting time Do Not Disturb, and I said, don't worry, people can still get through if they need to because your VIPs and repeated messages will get through. There's one other thing I forgot to mention. All that is true. There are settings that allow people to get through when they need to, but you can also, within specific contacts, designate that contact, that person, whoever it is able to bypass Do Not Disturb with either sounds, vibrations, or both. Just straight up, like they'll just go straight through it. So if you're worried that your, spouse or children won't be able to get in touch with you, go to their contacts and flip the switches for their ringtone and their vibrate settings and say that they will pierce the wall of Do Not Disturb. Of course, maybe you want to maybe you want to tell the person that it's on so they don't send you a message and expect Do Not Disturb to protect you. Or maybe you don't want to tell those people that it's on and they'll just assume that they shouldn't text you late at night. Anyway, you figure that out yourself, but it's a good setting. You should know it exists.
So I actually wrote a blog post about this in 2016 when it was new. And at the time, emergency bypass was one humongous switch for an entire contact. So what that meant was if I wanted to turn emergency bypass on for Erin, not only did it turn it on for the phone, but it turned it on for text messages, which is not advisable in my personal opinion, because sometimes she would be up late or get up early, either because she just happened to wake up or couldn't fall asleep, whatever, or maybe it was a baby-related thing at the time. And so if she tried to send me a text with the expectation that I wouldn't see it until I woke up, it would pass through and actually make noise, even if I'm on Do Not Disturb. Because, like I said, it was just it was all or nothing for emergency bypass. But I'm looking at this now in iOS 12, and you're right, John. What you just said is accurate, that in the ringtone section of a specific contact, there's a switch for emergency bypass. And in the text tone section for the same contact, there's a different switch for emergency bypass. So in my case, I have Erin's ringtone switch on, because if she's calling me at like midnight, something's deeply broken. And the text tone, I have emergency bypass off because, like I said, it is not unreasonable for her to send me a message either after I go to sleep or before I wake up, or actually more often than not, it's me sending them to her, not the other way around. But either way, you get the idea. So that's good to know. I did not know that that was the case, that there are now two switches. So if you've looked at this early on when it first came out in like iOS 10, then maybe look again because it's gotten better now. All right. We have some feedback with regard to your contact syncing, John. Have you fixed it?
I haven't actually even looked into it, but I did get this one piece of feedback that looked promising from Jordan McDonald. He said he heard about my contact syncing issues, and he had a similar problem. He said my syncing issue was due to one or more of the limits Apple places on sync, and he linked me to one of these Apple support articles. To help here's a quote from him, to help iCloud keep your contacts, calendar, reminders, and bookmarks up to date, keep your information within these limits. Now, that text, I'm sure someone thinks is helpful, but I read that text and it's like, I'm helping iCloud keep my stuff in sync by doing this? It's like, is this a requirement or is it not? Am I just like lightening the load? Like, iCloud is really tired. My complaint about the language is it doesn't make it clear that, like, look, if you don't stay within these limits, your stuff won't work. It's like, you can help it. But, if you don't do it, it'll just be harder, but it'll still, anyway, the limit is a whole bunch of limits listed, which some of them are, it's like, oh, you can only have 50,000 contacts. Fine. Like, I'm okay with that, right? These, there's going to be limits. It's nice they list them. Seems like that's what this support article is about. But then you get to the part about maximum size of a contact photo. And the maximum size of a contact photo is, why is it this number? God knows. 224 kilobytes, which is really, really small. That's, even in JPEG, like, because if I'm starting from, as I am starting from, like photos, like, whatever, 12 or 21 megapixels, I don't know, 21 megapixels? I don't know what the hell my camera is. Anyway, they're big photos, even as JPEGs. They are not 200 kilobytes. I'm starting from that. And maybe even if I crop them. So here's the thing. I'm going to look into this next time I go on a contact photo, mission. First thing is I'm going to make sure whatever photos I'm trying to get to sync are below this size. And the second thing is I'm going to see if I can interrogate some of my existing photos and like re-add them, but at smaller sizes to see if that helps, things go. There's a couple of people have had the feedback like, oh, I found one bad contact, and once I modified or deleted that contact, it stopped gumming up the works and everything synced. But the meta complaint is if these are the limits, and your stuff just silently doesn't sync because it's above one limits, that is terrible. Like, fine, you have these limits, fine, the limits are weird. You have to tell me, Apple, you have to say, I'm never going to sync your contacts because the photo you put on there is too big. Like, and I think I actually have seen an error message that says, oh, sorry, that image is too big if I like accidentally, drag like a giant ping image on there or something that's like multi-megabyte, right? So I think there is an error like that. So I'm hoping that this article is just old, or I'm hoping this can't possibly be true, because if all my contacts have stopped syncing because I put some images in there that are too big, and it just decided to never tell me that and just hope that I have a podcast that someone named Jordan McDonald listens to, and they'll send me an email pointing me to this obscure support article, boy, I'm going to be really depressed if that's true. But anyway, if you are having problems, maybe do that. By the way, the published date on this article is September 7th, 2018, so it's not looking good for my hope that this is not true.
All righty. What's next? Let's talk about the printer compatibility list, which came up several episodes ago when I got a new printer and was unreasonably excited about it. And you had pointed me to, I believe it was you, John, pointed me to the printer compatibility list, which
it was
Apple
me,
maintains.
actually.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies, Mark.
John, I don't think John even knew about it.
No, I know about it.
Oh,
Of course you
I
did.
thought I had that one.
But I hadn't checked it in years. Like I hadn't, like I didn't even know it was still maintained, which leads us to today's follow-up.
So why don't you continue in that vein?
So unfortunately, Apple is no longer maintaining this list because remember I said, I'll just wait for the thing to be updated for, and the thing I didn't know about also is that they'd start subdividing into printing versus scanning. It's still just 2 check marks, but it's better than it was, back in the day. But yeah, so they're not going to maintain it anymore, and it's mostly because of AirPrint. The text from the thing is, many vendors of printer scanners have adopted driverless technology such as AirPrint. Driverless is basically where they have an agreed upon interface and they push more logic onto the printer and they just say, look, printers, you got to talk to us in this way, otherwise we don't print. That's part of the AirPrint thing. Anyway. And they are no longer providing drivers for new devices. If your printer was made in the last several years, it probably doesn't require a driver. This list is provided for reference purposes and is no longer being updated. So basically they're saying printer drivers, Apple would like them to no longer be a thing. It's like, look, if you want to print on one of our things, do AirPrint, no drivers are required. And if you're not, you're probably already on one of these lists. So in theory, it's reasonable to stop updating it because people shouldn't be making printers that require drivers anymore. I'm not sure if that's actually true enough, and I kind of wish they would maintain that list, but I don't know. Like, for example, a more recent version of one of the HP things, like the numbers were a little bit bigger than the ones that are on the list. The last list that they have, the latest, I couldn't find an HP printer with that number. I found one with like that number minus 10, and maybe it's the same, and maybe it would work fine, but then maybe it's totally different. Like, you don't really know. So if they never update that list again, I'm never going to see a list like for Mojave to say, does this HP 12345 printer and scanner work with Mojave, with drivers or without drivers? It's just like, I guess I have to check whether it does AirPrint. Does AirPrint encompass scanning? Anyway, I'm still not doing anything with my printers, but Apple is out of the business of keeping track of this big long list of printers that work, and they just want everyone to use AirPrint. So welcome to the future of printing.
We are sponsored this week by Fracture, who prints your photos directly onto glass. Visit fractureme.com/ATP for a special discount on your first order. Almost everyone takes and shares photos, obviously, today, but very few of those photos end up being printed, and even fewer of them end up being ever displayed anywhere. You see it in like your social feeds maybe, and then it's gone after like a day, and you never see it again. Fracture wants you to focus on the moments that mean the most in your life by turning your favorite digital memories into actual photo decor. So they make these Fracture prints. These are beautiful glass photo prints. There's this thin, very lightweight sheet of glass, and kind of behind it, you see the picture shining through it. So it's protected. It's not going to like scratch off, and it's very lightweight, so it's not going to like crash down off your wall. And there's like this kind of thin like foam core backing behind it that you don't see once it's hung, but it helps hang it up. These are wonderful prints. It's a fantastic, both practical and beautiful way to have photos printed. We have them all over our house. They are awesome. They get wonderful compliments from everybody who sees them, and they make fantastic gifts. These are thoughtful, unique gifts for almost anybody who your photo might be meaningful to. So like if it's a photo of your kid or your pet, maybe give one to your parents or, their kids' grandparents, whatever else. Or if it's just, some like nice time you had with friends, maybe get a Fracture printed and have it sent to the friends you were with. There's all sorts of great gift possibilities with Fracture for pretty much any occasion, pretty much any person in your life, and people love them. They make wonderful gifts. And you can feel good about it too, because these are handmade in Gainesville, Florida from U.S. source materials in a carbon neutral factory. So you can really feel good about this purchase, and they're just really, really nice photo prints. Check it out today at fractureme.com/ATP. That's fractureme.com/ATP. That'll get you a special discount on your first order. And they will ask you after checkout which podcast you heard from. Make sure you say ATP. So once again, fractureme.com/ATP for a special discount on your first order. And don't forget to mention ATP in the question afterwards about where you hear about them. Thank you so much to Fracture for sponsoring our show.
There's a new Palm Pilot, sort of, except not at all. So somebody has licensed the Palm name to make a little itty-bitty BB phone that is kind of the Apple Watch to Android phones ish. So this is a little tiny phone that is a mostly full-featured Android phone that you can only buy on Verizon and only as an accessory to a regular phone. And I guess the idea is much like the cellular Apple Watch, where you can walk away from your phone and even, drive away from your phone, and you can still get phone calls on your watch and you can still get text messages on your watch. Well, on this little BB phone, you can get text messages and make phone calls and whatnot. But so it's designed to be with you when you don't want to have your big, huge phone with you. What? What?
Yo, dog.
Why?
I mean, when we talked about night and day phone, that was the joke of like several years ago. Now it's like your phone needs a phone.
Yeah. I don't get this at all. Like,
neither do I.
I think it's cool that people are trying new ideas, but not every new idea is a good one. Who wants to get away from their phone but bring another phone with them? I just don't get it.
I'm not sure whether this will succeed. Obviously, this, it's $350. Like, it's only from Verizon. It's a little Android thing. Like, it's a very limited scope for this. And the fact that they bought the Palm name and shoved it on the back means nothing because it's just an Android phone. But when I look at this, I think about and there's a kernel of a decent idea in there somewhere, which is as phones get bigger, physically speaking, it is sometimes inconvenient to have your, iPhone XS Max or your big phone with you, particularly in places like in the summer, you just got shorts and a t-shirt on. Like it's a big thing. But people also don't want to be without their phones. We know like the phone insecurity problem of it's like taking a pacifier away from, a toddler. They need to have their phone with them at all times. And there is a tension there. I like to have my phone with me at all times, so I'm in touch. But these phones are so freaking huge. But I love my big phone. I love it to death. I want my phone to be even bigger. It's just humongous, right? But I'm going to go and just try to stick that in my shorts pocket, or do I have to always bring like a bag or a backpack? It's just, it's kind of too much. And you're right that like the cellular Apple Watch is perhaps a thing there, but it's not like you're going to text people from your cellular Apple Watch, and you can't really watch a quick YouTube video or do an Instagram or like, right? So what this product points out to me is the potential, and I think it's a real potential for some, like a role that's not being filled. Phones used to be much smaller than they are now. They've gotten so big that they sort of have, priced themselves out. Price is the wrong word. They've removed themselves from a category of uses that they used to be able to fit into. Oh, a little thing you just chuck in your pocket and go, right? You don't do that anymore because they're so freaking big, right? So to me, this argues for a potential market for less humongous phones. Does it argue for people to buy a big phone and a tiny phone? Well, probably not, because that's kind of silly, and who wants to deal with two phones? But that's what they're trying to do here, to say sometimes you wish you had your phone with you, and you wish you could do all the phone things, including texting people and doing a Snapchat or making a little video, or do all the phone things, but it's not so darn big, but you still love your big phone. So I wish that what actually happened instead of this silliness is that more phone makers, Android and Apple, decided to go back to selling some phones that are not so big that they limit the context in which they can be comfortably used.
Good luck.
This would have been a lot more interesting if the phone number sharing thing was optional.
Yeah, don't you have to have a second number with it or something?
Well, no. Like it does the same.
Watch?
Yeah, it does the same thing that the watch does, which is that it shares your number with your main phone. Which also means, though, that like this can't be a device that like you buy for your kids to take to school with them, like because it is your number. Like you can't call from it to you.
Yeah, I mean, hardware wise, they could sell it individually, but how they're positioning it now is as a phone for your phone, or as a little thing, right? So I think there's a lot wrong with this product, but the idea, a market for a smaller phone, I think is there.
Right, like it's like there's two separate things about this. Like there's the idea of a small limited phone, and then the idea of a satellite phone that shares the same number as your main phone, so you can take it with you when you don't want to take your main phone for some reason. And like I think that latter idea about having them both share the same number is very limited in who actually would want that.
It's limited to people who have a day phone and a night phone or 2 Apple Watches. Like, I bet there is a market for that. It's probably not very big. And also about this being limited, it's not a limited phone. It does all the phone things. It's limited because it's smaller and probably gets worse battery life and, doesn't have a fastest processor. But there's nothing that there's no category of thing that you want to do on a phone that this can't do. Like, this is bigger than the original iPhone probably, right? Like, you can do all the things on it. It has a camera, it has video, it's like, just the stuff isn't that good, but it's not even that limited, right? So that's why I feel like someone might get one of these and come to the realization that most of the time, all they need is this little dinky underpowered thing, and that it feels so much better in their pocket than the giant thing. But very few people will ever come to that realization, because who the heck is going to buy 2 phones and deal with all that? Like, it's a tech nerd thing, or people with money to burn or whatever. So, but anyway, I hope other, phone makers look at this, and the lesson they take from it is not, well, we'll never do that because look what a disaster that product was. That's the lesson they take is that there's enough interest in this that they should consider making one of their models not be the size of a dinner tray.
I do think, though, like, this is one of those, like, aspirational products, like, even for the people who buy it, that they might think is very similar to the cellular Apple Watch. They might think, oh, I'm going to leave my big phone behind during occasions or roles X, Y, and Z, and I'll bring this little satellite phone with me. But then
find it.
And by the way, if you're an iPhone user, this doesn't have iMessage because it's Android, so that kind of sucks. I think this is mostly for Android people. If you're an iPhone user for the same money, you could just buy an iPhone SE. Anyway, but like, I think it's one of those things where you might think you would use this in a few contexts, but in real life, the first few times you did it, you would miss things about your big phone. Number one, frequently cited by Apple Watch people, you miss the camera. And this phone does have a camera, but it's not going to be nearly as good as the ones that are in the flagship phones that you probably have access to otherwise if you're spending this kind of money frivolously on a phone. So like, there's going to be a number of those things for everybody. Like there's going to be things that, like, yeah, you know what, you think you want to leave your big phone at home, but once you're without it, like there's a lot of things that you're going to miss and you're going to regret leaving it behind. And so this little phone is going to then go sit in a drawer somewhere for the rest of its life. Like I just see this as a problem that doesn't really the issue of having a satellite phone that you sometimes take with you is not a thing. That is not a thing anybody really wants, or at least anybody wants in great numbers. And even if you give it to them, they will realize they won't actually use it, shortly afterwards. So I don't see that at all. The idea of there being smaller phones as choices to buy for your main / only phone, that idea has merit. I'm not sure how much the market supports that, but that idea has merit. But that's a very different thing than what they've shipped here.
Yeah, this one may be a little bit too down market, because 350, like, the quality of the camera and the CPU, it's got a, it's probably too much of a downgrade, right? That's why everyone's just saying, like, just take an Apple Watch, right? But no one wants to text people on an Apple Watch. They're like, and who wants to text people on a screen this small? Just ask all the people who use the original iPhone and all the iPhones before they got tall with the 5 and before they got big with the 6. Like, we did it. It was a thing that happened, so it's viable, but the quality of this camera cannot be good. I mean, you can read the review to see what it looks like. But it's probably below the threshold where it's just going to annoy people. But most people don't have the newest, latest, greatest phone with an awesome camera. So I feel like you could make a cheaper, smaller phone as a standalone that would find a market. And the Palm stuff, I just feel like is insulting, because it's like they're the heritage of Palm. Like, you just buy the name and you just stick it on the back of the thing in this weird thing where it's like PALM in like a square shape. I don't like it. It's upsetting.
By the way, user Mike Yu in the chat points out that actually the Palm phone is way smaller than the original iPhone, which to me is like, that's a cool thing to have something that small, but you then pretty much won't be able to like text on it. Like, it has an on-screen keyboard like modern smartphones, but like, you're not going to be able to see that much on that tiny little screen. Typing is going to be really hard. What we do on phones today barely even fits on the iPhone SE. To make something that's even significantly smaller than that, and to try to make it a useful thing, like, it's like, if this phone was like $50, that'd be a different story. Or if it was like really good and a little bit bigger, so it'd be a little more useful, that'd be a different story. But right now, it's like, it's too small to have general use, and it's not a standalone product, so you can't like bring it, you can't like buy it for your kids or whatever. And also, it's too expensive to be like a kind of like disposable, like, keep it just in case you need it kind of thing. Like $350 is half the price of a really good phone. So I don't see what this is going for.
It does have more RAM than an iPhone 7.
Well, that's good. You won't be able to fit. I mean, you can fit as many apps as you want on them, as long as they're crappy Android apps that you'll never want to use because they're so tiny.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, it's well, that leads us into our next topic. But the most of the specs of this thing are ridiculous because it's a $350 phone, but it's actually got a surprising amount of RAM.
I mean, I don't think it's that terrible a device for the constraints it has. I just don't really understand what would make somebody purchase one. Like, I understand the pitch, but realistically, nobody's going to do that.
Exactly.
A bunch of people are going to do it because they'll be intrigued by the idea, but it's too much of a downgrade from their actual phone that I don't think that will be a viable substitute.
I don't know. All right, so you said that was a segue into our next topic. Tell me more.
Yeah, so this is about Adobe's announcements at their Adobe Max conference. There's a bunch of them. Maybe we'll talk about some of the other ones later, but today, the main one, the highlight is Photoshop CC is coming to the iPad in 2019. And this may not sound like much because, like, hasn't there already been Photoshop for the iPad? Like, who cares or whatever? Like, so, but the important part is that this is, in Adobe's words and in all the PR things, this is real Photoshop on the iPad. It's not a new application that's kind of like Photoshop. It's not a brand new application that can also read PSD files sometimes. This is full-fledged Photoshop on the iPad. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And they emphasize, that it's the same code base and that it's fully compatible. And obviously, especially in the beginning, there will be some features that are only on the desktop, but I'm sure they'll shore up those gaps. But this is sort of Adobe finally, I don't know, jumping in. Like, Apple has wanted pro applications in the iPad for a long time. And for the longest time, Adobe has been like, we'll make some apps for the iPad. We have some ideas of cool things we can do, but Photoshop is a desktop app. Sorry, it's you can't have that on the iPad. And now you can. And it's cross-compatible. They have their, cloud stuff where you can put the document in their Creative Cloud. I don't know if they repeat cloud. And work on it on your desktop and work on the same thing. And it also reads from iCloud Drive and Dropbox. And it's just 100% compatible. You make a document on desktop, you can open it up in your iPad. You make a document on the iPad, you can open it on desktop. It's just, real Photoshop. And obviously they adapted the interface. It's not the same as it is on the desktop. There's a bunch of things, touch affordances and some interesting new tools in there. But I thought this was, it's about time. I'm sure all of Adobe's competitors are a little bit scared because Adobe, their application may or may not be as good as some of the existing stuff, or may not be as, because most people who have had to do work on the iPad or like doing work on the iPad have already chosen a non-Adobe application for the most part. To do their stuff, and so they're late to the game. But Adobe has an existing subscription system. Somehow they're going to work out the financials with the Apple stuff of, like, if you can subscribe through Apple thing or whatever. But their current workaround is that if you buy Photoshop CC, you just get the iPad app for free. I'm sure they've all worked all this out with Apple. Adobe has tons of applications and lots of history, and Photoshop is the 800-pound gorilla in the world of image processing. So I bet the competitors aren't particularly happy about Adobe finally doing this, but I think it's a good move for the iPad, and hopefully it'll push Apple in the direction of making the iPad even more pro. But the reason I said that they are the end of that weird Palm phone thing was a good transition to this is because there's a particular technical angle of this that I was thinking about when the announcement was made, and I have some musings based on it. And the technical angle is, how do you get Photoshop, a big fancy desktop application that historically has been a thing that you use to show off the power of your computer, particularly your Mac, how do you get that onto an iPad?
Yep.
And we've talked about how the iPad CPUs and GPUs are surprisingly powerful. About the JavaScript benchmark being faster than the iMac Pro, and just in general being sometimes just being straight up faster than a lot of Apple's laptops. Like, that doesn't seem like a problem. CPU power seems like it's there. And, storage for big images, don't they make like a 512 gig iPad or something, a 512 gig phone? Like, whatever, there's plenty of room to store giant files, and especially if they're in the cloud, it's not a big deal. But there is one aspect of iOS devices, even the big iPads, that doesn't seem like it's up to snuff to deal with something like Photoshop, and that's RAM. There hasn't been a Mac sold with 4 gigs of RAM in it for many, many years.
You sure? Doesn't the Air still base itself at that?
Oh, please don't say that. I really hope that's not true. That can't possibly be true. That's impossible. Anyway.
I thought it was true, but we can look it up.
Nope, it's 8.
4 gigs of RAM is not a lot for a Photoshop machine. Let's put it that way. Like again, Photoshop always wanted the most RAM you can put in it so you can have really big images. And why does Photoshop use a lot of RAM? I mean, the main answer is layers, right? So most of the time you could have one image that's probably not that high res, but maybe it's like 600 DPI for like print, publishing a magazine cover or whatever. But imagine that document has 50 layers in it. That stuff just eats memory.
Also, like the way Photoshop deals with a lot of the images, it has to deal with them in uncompressed format. Like you think of a JPEG as being like, it's like 8 megs for this giant image. But like, no, actually, like if you deal with the raw pixels in an uncompressed format, like multiply the width by the height by 4. And that's how many bytes it needs, at least, depending on what else. You could be doing more things. You could have more deep color. Like, so like it's a lot of memory. Like a single, like, one screen large image off the top of my head is like, 20, 30 megs. Like it's a lot, right? It's way more data than like the JPEG version is. And to do a lot of operations efficiently, that has to be in memory.
Yeah, so you may be thinking, okay, well, but that's the modern world where all the Macs have tons of RAM. But Macs did ship with 4 gigs of RAM. We just talked about my Mac Pro that shipped with 2 gigs of RAM, and Photoshop ran on those machines, so it's obviously not a big deal. Photoshop can run in much less memory than we run it in today. Maybe it's not great, but it can do it. There's a second thing to think about, though.
Real-time follow-up. There is indeed one Mac that is still sold new.
Oh, the Mac Mini.
Oh, God.
Updated 1,600 days ago.
The Mac Mini $500 configuration comes stock with 4 gigs of RAM.
For Mac Mini. Probably not a Photoshop powerhouse. But anyway, so the other thing to be concerned about with iOS devices is, and you often hear this, and this is not actually true, people will say that iOS devices don't have virtual memory. That's not true. iOS devices have always had a virtual memory in that they have your program's address memory using virtual addresses that are then translated to physical addresses, right? So virtual memory has been in iOS from day one. What people mean when they say iOS doesn't have virtual memory is they mean that iOS doesn't use swap, will not page things to disk. So in a virtual memory system, when a program wants more memory and there's no more memory to give, the system will take something that is in memory, hopefully that hasn't been used recently or isn't being actively used, and it will swap it out to disk. It will say, I'm going to take this big chunk of RAM, I'm going to write it to a swap file, and I'll say, you stay there, and then I'll give you this RAM that they were using before. And if they ever want that thing back, I'll go back to the disk and pull it out of the swap file and bring it back in. Obviously, going to disk, and swap is way slower than RAM, and you really don't want it to be in a situation where it's constantly shuffling things. Oh, I got to take this out of RAM, put it on disk, or I take this thing off the disk and put it back in RAM. That's called swapping, and then it'll make everything slow.
That's called the 90s.
Yeah, iOS has never had swap because, as you can imagine, like it was at the ragged edge of what was possible, like in the original iPhone. And if there's a possibility that by loading a big game or something, stuff can swap, and then you try to switch and swap it back in, Flash wasn't always as fast as it is today, especially on iOS devices. And even if it's fast, it's way slower than having things in RAM. So iOS from day one, continuing today, has said no swap. So it has virtual memory, but it doesn't have swap. And what that means for RAM limits is like your 2 gig Mac Pro, the 2 gig Mac Pro that I'm sitting next to, we could run Photoshop or whatever. Maybe you have something that has too many layers, doesn't fit in 2 gigs. Doesn't matter. You can always swap out portions of it. And it'll make it slower, but at least you can do it. But in iOS, when RAM is exhausted and when the system has ejected every other application from the system and you ask for more RAM, the OS kills your program. Like, there is no more to give. There's nothing like, the OS never says, well, there's no more RAM. I've killed all the other programs. I'll just start swapping some stuff out to disk. It doesn't do that. It says the RAM is all used up and you are the only program running. I'm going to kill you now. And I think it gives you like low memory warnings, but eventually the OS kills your program, right? And so what happens in Photoshop, it's just like the desktop. If I make this awesome image in the desktop that's, some 600 DPI magazine cover with 50 layers, and then I try to open it on my iPad and I try to do some manipulation that requires it to load a bunch of stuff into memory to run some filter across 7 layers, and it keeps asking for more and more memory to perform that operation, and then it runs out. The OS is going to kill the program. You can't, how do they allow you to edit files that are too big to fit in RAM. And remember, the biggest iOS devices, I think, have 4 gigs of RAM. Is that the max now?
I think so.
On the big iPad or on the iPhone XS Max and all that stuff. Anyway, it's not a lot of RAM. There is very easy to find a real-world Photoshop image that will happily eat up 4 gigs of RAM while you're working on it. And keep in mind that the OS has to take some portion of that, and so you don't even get all the 4 gigs to yourself. So that's a little bit of a head-scratcher, but obviously they did it. They demoed it, right? So how did they do it? I don't know the details of how they actually did it, but there are a bunch of possibilities, but one of them I find intriguing and delightful, which is rooted in the fact that Photoshop has already run in the past on a platform that did not have swap. In fact, Photoshop has run on a platform that did not have virtual memory. That platform is classic macOS. Classic macOS did not have virtual memory and did not have swap.
Wait, what?
And by the way,
wait,
in the early days,
as in not until macOS 10?
The virtual memory part of it came into effect a little bit towards the end of classic macOS's life. But the original Mac, no virtual memory, real addresses for everything, single shared address space, no swap, no virtual memory, no nothing. Right. Yeah,
the original one, yeah, but by the 90s, they had to have had at least some of that. Please, for the love of God.
I think they might. Well, if you think about it, if you got programs that expect big shared memory space, I think they had some. Well, there were third-party programs that could give you some of this, and I think by macOS 9 or whatever, they had some kind of virtual stuff. Maybe I don't think they ever had a real swap file. But anyway, Photoshop ran before all of that. It ran I don't know, it didn't run on obviously the Mac 128, but on the Mac Plus, I believe, which had 1 megabyte of RAM, I think Photoshop 1.0 ran on the Mac Plus. Certainly the Mac SE, Photoshop could run on a machine with a monochrome display, which is always fun. So how did it do it? How did Photoshop run on a machine with a ridiculously small amount of RAM and no virtual memory system and no swap? They did it the only way you could possibly do it, which is within Photoshop. They wrote a system that said, when you're using memory to do something and the OS says there's no more memory to give, you implement your own little virtual memory system where you'll make your own little swap files off to the side, and you will take portions of the image data and write it out to your own little, Photoshop swap files, like a tiny miniature virtual memory system just for that program within that program, so it can shuffle things off of disk into memory, operate on them, put them back on disk, so on and so forth. And so that's Photoshop's origins. It was originally a Mac program, and it was born on a platform that didn't have this. It would be extremely delightful if the code to do that from original Photoshop suddenly came in super handy if it once again finds itself on a system that has no swap. So that it's we have our own swapping system written already. We can use that to take things out of memory and put them onto disk and pull them off of disk or whatever. I would love for that to be true. It's obviously potentially a competitive advantage over other image editors like, Affinity and the other competitors to Photoshop, which must have to do something similar because, again, if you want to work with images that are too big to fit in memory and your operating system does not have swap, you need to do something like that yourself. And Photoshop, Adobe, in theory, has experience doing that very same thing. So that, to me, is the most interesting and exciting part of Photoshop on the iPad, the idea that potentially code from classic macOS has risen from the grave, or perhaps it never even left Photoshop and is now potentially a competitive advantage to Adobe over other programs that did not have their origin on a system with no swap.
I mean, modern versions of Photoshop still have the swap disk options, swap folders,
scratch disk, yeah.
Yeah, it's it probably has the same system because lots of high end or high performance apps will do things like write their own memory allocator, because they can tailor it to exactly their use and they can, get faster performance and more control than the system stuff. I don't know of a lot of programs that write their own swap file system, but I'm sure somebody does, and beyond just Photoshop. And so it wouldn't surprise me if Adobe still uses that, even on Macs with 64 gigs of RAM. They might still use that kind of system just because they already had it, and they can tweak it, they can tune it, and we know it still uses scratch disk for something, so that could be what they're for. And also, this is just one of those things that when you ask, what do you need Photoshop on the iPad for? And somebody says, oh, you can use alternative X, Y, or Z. One of the things that really separates pro apps from more, basic or consumer or prosumer ones is this ability to deal with extremes. and this is true even on the Mac too. Like this is true everywhere. But like, what really separates pro apps from the rest is you can do operations on a 300 by 300 clip art thing you found on the web, or you can do operations on like an entire like 600 DPI 11 by 17 page layout of something, and it'll be slower if it needs to be, but it won't crash. It'll still work. Like it'll let you do what you have to do. And I've never used any competitors to Photoshop really, so I don't know how they handle these extremes. They might handle them just fine, as far as I know. But as like a customer of these things and a user of these things, like if I were looking to change my workflow to a competitor, like everyone has had to do on the iPad up until this comes out, one of the things I'd be worried about is like, can it really handle extremes or not? Because occasionally I need it to. And so to have something that is known to have extreme capability, like Photoshop, that is known to handle crazy things, and at least, even if it isn't fast, it'll at least work. That's a really good selling point for them. And there's lots of reasons why I think they're going to do well with this on the iPad. But one of the big ones to me is like, you're going to know that you can throw anything at this, and if you're patient enough, it will probably work.
So what I can't help but wonder is if at one point in the past, or perhaps in the present, they needed to create their own like virtual memory system, what else do you think that they abstracted away about the underlying platform in order to make things easier? Like, since Photoshop runs on Windows, it runs on Mac OS, and soon will be running on iOS, how much do you think they're running against actual APIs or some sort of like adapter layer that or facade maybe that Adobe wrote themselves? And at what point are they like creating like an entire virtual machine within Photoshop just to kind of smooth all these rough edges out? It's I don't argue with what you're saying, John. I can't help but wonder, like, how far does this really go?
It used to be that the Mac version of Photoshop and the Windows version of Photoshop had separate UIs. Like the Mac version certainly is the first one to exist, and it had native Mac UI, or as native as it could be. But at some point, due to someone's great idea about economies of scale and not repeating yourself or whatever, they made a unified user interface that was surely some underlying Adobe framework that rendered a Mac UI in the Mac and a Windows UI in Windows. And the way you could tell that was that the Mac UI suddenly became a lot less Mac-like. And like you entered the era where Adobe apps had essentially Adobe interfaces. Like they weren't Mac interfaces, they weren't Windows interfaces, they were Adobe interfaces. And I think a lot of Adobe apps are still like this, where it's like they're pulling from an Adobe suite of controls, and their idea of what a window and a button and a control should look like is the Adobe idea. And it looks different on Windows and the Mac, but it's clear that there's been some massive unification under the behind the scenes. That hasn't always been beneficial, but I'm sure that's the case. And obviously their engines for dealing with images are mostly cross-platform at this part, plus or minus the various use of the different acceleration frameworks on different platforms, right? So that's been a complaint about Adobe in the past from a Mac user perspective, is that they don't feel like Mac apps, they feel like Adobe apps. Obviously, if you like Adobe apps, or if you move from platform to platform, that's an advantage. But sometimes I look at Adobe apps, most Adobe apps, and I think this is like a weird, it's not an Electron app, but it's like a weird kind of, I don't know. It doesn't feel like a Mac application, and sometimes it's kind of ugly, and sometimes I kind of wish the controls were the regular controls. But it's at a certain point, Adobe's probably like, "Look, Apple, you're lucky we still make Photoshop." For a while, they were like, "We're lucky you still make Photoshop for your platform at all, because Windows has taken over the world." Obviously, that's less relevant today, and the iPad is certainly the more popular tablet platform than Android, because they don't have that many great tablet apps. But yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of that sharing going on behind the scenes. I'm not sure that if they ever had to implement a virtual memory system for Windows, because I think the first version of Windows they wrote it for had both virtual memory and swap, but I'm not sure.
I believe Windows got that in 3.1-ish, somewhere around that range, because my Gateway 2000 computer had the ability to either enable or disable 386 enhanced mode, which I'm pretty sure was virtual memory.
My word. So do we think this is going to be good? And I don't say that to snark, and I'm not trying to be funny. It's just, it's hard for me to imagine that that this is going to be without hiccups. Like just look at file management on the iPad, which is something that's relatively new. Like file management is not easy on the iPad. And what happens when you want to suck in something from an SD card? Like, do you still have to go through the Photos app, the Apple Photos app to suck in these photos from the SD card and then bring them into Photoshop and then back to the, your photo library or your camera roll or whatever? Like, it just seems like this is still going to have a lot of hurdles. Now, those hurdles are the sorts of hurdles that really make Mike and Federico happy, but to somebody like me, that I find that to be infuriating. So is this going to be good, great? I mean, I guess the fact that Adobe has Cloud, hence CC, because that's Creative Cloud, once you get a file, you can store it in Creative Cloud, I would assume, and then it just kind of appears everywhere, I would assume, kind of iCloud-like. But I don't know, don't you think that this is still going to be fairly clunky?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the potential upsides of Adobe bringing Photoshop to the iPad is hopefully it will push Apple in the direction to make the iPad a better platform for pro applications. The file stuff, I think actually we're probably mostly okay for the cloud options because it always got its thing, but it also works with like iCloud Drive and Dropbox. And honestly, even if there was full file system access from every application, there was an SD card slot in the side of the iPad, it's still probably more convenient to do the cloud stuff. You know what I mean? Like you're not using SneakerNet to ship files around, even to another Mac. It's not like, Macs have great file system access, but the way two Macs would look at the same files, they would, pull it up on a network share or something, right? So I think the cloud solution is probably mostly okay. But the fact that some doors are closed to you, hopefully it will make Apple consider, especially when it's not just one file, but it's a whole bunch of files, or like you're working on a project that's a folder full of files, and you can do all this with a cloud drive as well. But there are some things that are a little bit easier locally, or there could be security sensitive things where you don't want it going across the network. Who knows? So I hope Apple pays attention. There was an interesting video. We'll put a link in the show notes to this Verge review of Photoshop on the iPad. And they had a bunch of their artists who work for the Verge, mess with it and say what they think about using Photoshop on the iPad. They have some interesting things to say that you might not think of if you don't, draw on a computer all day. Like one of the ones was a person talking about, this is true of any iPad app, not Photoshop, but if you're drawing with the pencil on the iPad and you want to draw at a different angle, you can just rotate the iPad like you would a piece of paper, which is not true of a computer screen, and is also not true, interestingly, of something like the Surface Studio, where the screen is like a big iMac-like screen and kind of folds down. You can't take that and easily like just twist it like you would twist a piece of paper to scribble it at a different angle, because it's just too big and it's not on a swivel thing. You'd have to like turn the whole computer and it would be awkward. Like it's more like a drafting table than a piece of paper on the drafting table, which is an interesting angle for people considering drawing on the iPad. But the other one that really stood out to me was the one artist who said she was doing, she did some, they all tried to do some like real non-trivial project on the thing. She said by the end of it, her hand was hurting a little bit from gripping the Apple Pencil. And she said her Wacom tablet that she normally uses has a pencil with a big, thick, ergonomic grip with a smushy thing on the end. And if you look at the Apple Pencil, it's a beautiful, simple, elegant shape. There's nothing extraneous, blah, blah, blah. But it's pretty darn skinny, right? It's pretty skinny. It certainly doesn't have one of those ergonomic grip things, and you could add one or whatever. But it goes to show how ill-suited, I don't want to get Mark on a rant, but how ill-suited so many aspects of modern Apple design are to demanding professional applications. Because if you are a professional using a stylus all day, just using the Apple Pencil the way it is probably not great. Like you don't see a lot of styluses or other things used by artists for a long period of time, especially with a computer, that don't look and aren't actually more ergonomic than a simple, unadorned, fairly slippery, skinny cylinder. And there's a reason for that. Like there's a reason, things that look ergonomic tend to look ugly and be shaped so that they're easy to comfortably grip and they reduce fatigue or whatever. And it's like, okay, well, you don't have to use the Apple Pencil. There is a wide variety of pressure-sensitive styluses. Oh, wait, not really. So again, I hope bringing more artists to seriously consider the iPad, because now, quote-unquote, real Photoshop is there. Again, tons of artists have been using the iPad, and Adobe has made applications. And by the way, Adobe's also making non-Photoshop applications that are more of a green field. Let's reimagine what kind of illustration application we can make. I hope all of that and the influx of new creatives and all that stuff leads Apple down the same road that I hope that they're traveling for the Mac Pro, which is, what do professionals really need out of our platforms? Let's listen to them and make something for them, even if that thing is not well suited to consumers. Consumers don't want a weird Wacom tablet looking pencil thing. If they want a pencil at all, the simple Apple one is probably the right thing, although they really wish they had a place to stick it instead of it just being loose. So I hope all of this is nudging Apple in the right direction. And by the way, at Adobe Max, Phil Schiller came on stage and talked about Photoshop and how happy he is it's coming to the iPad and how great the iPad is and so on and so forth. So Apple is in on this and they're working together. So things are trending in the right direction. And speaking of the Apple Pencil, I was thinking about this the other day. I don't know how many people listening to this actually have an Apple Pencil. If you do have it, do you know where it is? There's lots of ways that you travel with it and little clip-on things and places to stick it and all sorts of stuff like that.
It's so bad.
And with the cap, forget about the cap, right? I was thinking about this and it's like, well, that's true. But in the idealized world of Apple, many problems either don't exist in Apple's idealized world or they don't acknowledge them. But this is a case where Apple itself definitely acknowledges this issue. And they acknowledge it with these weird little white trays in all the Apple stores. Why do they have these weird little white trays where the pencils goes? It's not like at the bank where it's connected with a cable. Like there's no anti-theft device attached to it, right? Oh, the pencil's weighted. It will never roll off a table. Why are those little, dugout canoes of plastic there? Because if they weren't, the pencils would be, no one would ever know where the friggin' pencils are. Where do I put this when I'm done with it? How do I put it down? Will it roll off the table? Will someone step on it? You put it back in the little plastic canoe, right? I think those little stupid little canoes are the greatest Apple admission that there is something missing from the workflow, as they would say, of the Apple Pencil.
Yeah, like it's very frustrating to me. Like I have an Apple Pencil, I have an iPad Pro, and I have a smart keyboard. There is no way to have all three of those things with me that doesn't suck. Like, why? It seems like these three products were never designed with the idea that somebody would actually have any two of them. Like, the smart keyboard and the iPad work together okay. It isn't even great. It's just merely okay. The pencil and the iPad, it seems like they were designed on different planets, and it's just a coincidence they happen to work together. But like, no one ever thought you might want to carry an Apple Pencil while you carry an iPad. Like, that seems to totally have been not considered at all. And the idea that here you can get a smart keyboard, which is wonderful. I actually really enjoy having the smart keyboard on my iPad. It totally changed how frequently I use the iPad, greatly for the better. But the smart keyboard is a large cover that has lots of surface area and is willingly bulking it up. Maybe they could have put a spot there to store a pencil, but they didn't. They released a case that is like this big leather flap that has a slot for the iPad and a slot for the pencil. But if you have a smart keyboard, it won't fit in the case. And it would be very awkward to get it out anyway. It's just like everything about it. It's just like, I one of the biggest things I want to see with the anticipated iPad event that's probably happening sometime soon, I really want to see how and if they have rethought how people actually use the Apple Pencil, and if they can somehow make it easy to have it with you more often. I would love that, because I literally have all these things and I never use the pencil because, as John alluded to, like it's like, off like in a cup or a drawer somewhere,
and the battery's dead in it now because you haven't charged it forever, because that's awkward too.
Yeah, like the battery's definitely dead because I have not charged it because I never have it with me, and so I never use it, and it's such a waste. Like, please, for the love of God, Apple, like, design these products together.
It charges in 30 seconds, though, and you can get two. Anyway, there's all sorts of solutions to the charging thing that are part of the pitch.
Yeah. By the way, when it's totally dead, it doesn't charge in 30 seconds.
Well, you get like a minute out of it, and you get 5 minutes out of it in 30 seconds. They had some pitch of like a very short charge time gives you a surprising amount of draw time, even if you're going from dead. I'm not sure how accurate this, but that was part of their original pitch, which is not supposed to be an admission that you're probably going to lose it and leave it uncharged. But anyway, there's one thing that Apple used to do better, probably not for great reasons and maybe not like as a conscious thing, but the 90s Apple, and Apple through the 90s, maybe into the 2000s, was very into making like a whole bunch of stuff that works together, even into the 2000s in the Mac OS X era. Like, to give an example, to a fault. All right. So Apple, on my original, I don't know, my Power Mac G3, maybe, whatever, they had the ADC, Apple Display Connector. Remember that thing?
Yeah.
It was like a single cable that drove a display with power and USB and video. Only worked with Mac stuff. It was a proprietary thing that was like piggybacking DVI and a bunch of other stuff over a bunch of pins and a custom connector, so that you could have a display that worked with the monitor and then worked with the keyboard that connected to the display, and the power button on the old Macs was on the keyboard, and that power button could turn on the Mac that was connected with it. Like, systems that work together. The G4 Cube comes with little speakers that match the thing, and then the thing connects with ADC to the display by a single cable. Like, match sets of stuff where if you buy all the things, it's clear they work together. Buy your laptop, the display has a little pigtail on it, and the pigtail has a MagSafe connector, and that goes into there, and that if you kept buying stuff, the next piece of the very expensive Apple stuff that you bought, you'd be like, oh, this fits in here. Oh, that fits in there. And if I buy these things, they fit in there, and they match this thing. Like, things aesthetically matched. There was a styling theme with them. The connectors on them all matched. They all work together. If you bought just one of them, it worked fine. But as you bought more of them, you saw where they plugged in. Whereas with the iPad, the covers work with the iPad, and the keyboard works with the iPad, and the pencil works with the iPad. But the keyboard, pencil, covers, and iPad do not get along. As Marco pointed out, like, once you get more than, it's like the chicken and the wolf or whatever. Once you get more than two things in this boat, bad things happen, right? So that is I don't know. Again, I don't think it was a particularly conscious thing, but the idea that you can, that it is attractive, making it attractive to buy all the things, because every new thing you buy just fits in neatly and it feels like you're building like the whole package, the ultimate setup. Like, you got to have the G4 Cube with the cinema display, with the speakers, with the Apple keyboard that turns the thing on. I think that wasn't on the Cube, but anyway, like, the whole setup was attractive. Even back to like the laser writer, get a Mac, get a laser writer, get the extended keyboard, get the Apple optical drive, get the Apple external hard drive, get the Apple printer. Now we're getting into Wi-Fi routers again, right? But that whole motivation to buy all the things in the history of this show, my recollection is a lot of our complaints have had an angle where if you are Apple's best customer and you buy all the Apple things, you are punished for it in some subtle way. Like, if you buy all, lots of Apple stuff, things work not as well as if you just had one of them. And that's not the right cycle. Apple should make it attractive for people to spend all the money.
And I remember that was the case, for the first several years that I came to Apple platforms. This was roughly 2008.
Yeah.
The more Apple stuff I had, the better everything worked together. And everything, what it did, guys, it just worked. And I don't know. I shouldn't be encouraging this, because we've made this speech every episode for the last 100, and so we can hopefully let it go. But I echo what you're saying, John. That it would. I admire Apple trailblazing in so many ways, in so many categories, but I also wish I could have it both ways and have them not screw up what already exists in order to trailblaze. But you can't have it both ways.
I just don't think it's that much to ask that when you buy an iPhone or an Apple Watch and you also have a MacBook, that you can plug one into the other to charge it.
Don't be ridiculous. Anything else about Photoshop?
There's a lot more. Maybe I'll watch that video. And Gemini is their application that's like combines raster and vector stuff, and it's like new. We talked about Adobe XD a while back. Like, there's a bunch of interesting stuff that Adobe thing. Maybe I'll watch the video and bring it.
There's that YouTube Premiere edition, like the Premiere Rush.
Oh yeah, the Rush CC for doing portrait video, which everyone was very excited about, because portrait video is definitely a thing. But editing it in a quote unquote real video editing application where no one conceived of the idea that people might want portrait video is a little bit tricky. So yeah, there's a bunch of exciting announcements. They also had, I think, a pretty good joke when Phil Schiller was there. I mean, maybe it's a tech dad joke or whatever, but I give it a thumbs up. Phil Schiller came out and did his little spiel, and everyone was happy to hear him say how great Adobe is and how great Apple is and so on and so forth. And when they whisked him off stage, they had a gift for him from the Adobe people to thank him for coming there. They gave him a jacket from the team that was making Photoshop or whatever. and it said Content Aware Phil, Phil, on the back of the jacket.
That's pretty good.
And they used the hyphen correctly.
Oh, even better.
I thought that was a good joke, Adobe.
We are sponsored this week by Squarespace. Start building your website today at squarespace.com/ATP and enter offer code ATP at checkout to get 10% off. Make your next move with a beautiful website and unique domain from Squarespace. Squarespace sites are so incredibly easy to use, you will wonder why you've ever made a website any other way. You can get everything you want at Squarespace, whether it's something simple like a blog or a content site, or whether it's something more complex like hosting a podcast or a storefront or maybe like a fancy image gallery or something like that. These are things that have been pretty hard to do traditionally with most website builders or most hosting plans, and Squarespace just does it all with all their plans, and it's super easy no matter what your skill level is. You can get great results out of Squarespace with very little time and very little effort. And you can customize it all. It's very much like, what you see is what you get. Live previewing interface. It's all like, rich text. You don't have to see code ever. It's wonderful. Check it out today at squarespace.com/ATP. When you need to make a site, just give it like an hour. Try it there first. I bet you will stick with it because it's so wonderful to have all that functionality built in with very little time and effort from you. And if you ever need any support, Squarespace is there to support it with friendly 24/7 support, of course. But I bet you won't even need it because it's just really easy. So check it out today. Once again, squarespace.com/ATP and use code ATP when you sign up to get 10% off your first purchase. Once again, squarespace.com/ATP where you can start a free trial and then use code ATP when you sign up to get 10% off. Thank you so much to Squarespace. Squarespace, make your next move.
All right, let's do some Ask ATP. Jake wants to know, in the age we currently live in, how do the three of us stay informed about non-tech news? Is it just Twitter? And if not, are there specific sites or voices that you would recommend? I don't have a terribly good answer for this. I watch national news in the morning as I eat breakfast. I watch headline news, which I personally find to be relatively center. If you disagree with me, that's fine. Just keep it to yourself. It's good enough for me. I do that most days of the week, and then when I remember, although I forgot this morning, on Wednesdays I turn on Fox and Friends because I'm an idiot, but I also like to see how other idiots... I like to see how the other side lives. And so that's mostly it. Anything else that's national typically bubbles up via Twitter or there. Marco, what do you do?
Very little, because everything that's in the news for the last, about 2 years has been so horrible that for my own mental health, I know this is not the responsible thing to do as like a citizen of the universe, but for my own mental health, I try to block out as much of it as I possibly can. So I mostly don't follow news sources regularly, except for those that bubble up from links from friends and stuff.
Yep. That's mostly the same with me, with the exception of TV in the morning for about 15 minutes.
Also, for God's sakes, turn off Fox and Friends.
It is, all kidding aside, it is truly and utterly heinous. It is,
and you are contributing to it by watching it.
Yeah, but.
You are patronizing it. You are rating. You are increasing its numbers. You are hearing what they are saying.
He's not a Nielsen family. I don't know how the ratings work these days. Maybe the cable boxes all report back. I don't know.
I understand that perspective, but to me, it's important for me to at least understand is too strong a word because I don't understand these maniacs, but to hear the other side. And again, understand isn't the right word. Appreciate isn't the right word, but I guess just get exposed to the other side because it helps me to understand the victims of Fox News. And I use that word deliberately. I'm not trying to be funny, but even because I am more worldly, I think, than your average Fox and Friends viewer, I understand when they're just lying to me, which is pretty much 99% of the time that they're talking. But it is interesting because I can understand better how people that I care deeply for can get hoodwinked by these lies and this propaganda. And so I personally think it's useful for me, but I am not trying to say that it's useful for anyone else. And it is true, utter filth. It is garbage, and it is a danger to our democracy. But it helps me to understand some of the people I care about to watch it.
I find that reason unconvincing for the cost that it is incurring.
That's fair. John, how about you? What do you do?
Not to keep harping on Casey, but I was actually surprised by your. I heard about the Fox and Friends thing before. You'd mentioned that, but what I was more surprised by is the fact that you voluntarily watch television news in any form. Because my experience of my peer group, or anything close to it, is that people our age or younger don't watch a lot of TV news. Like I would love to see like the age demographics of who watches TV news.
There's probably a lot of overlap with white car ownership.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I find all TV news in all forms, in all venues, to just not, like, I find it, my brain rejects it. I cannot stand it. It's nothing to do with politics. It has to do with just the form. Now, I grew up with the form. It's not like I'm unfamiliar with it. I grew up with it, right? But from my modern sensibilities, I don't want what they're giving me. Like, and again, the TV is just a mechanism by which the news gets here, but there is a form that it has evolved over time to be like their selection of what they want to report does not match what I want to hear, like, ever. It's just too, even local news, maybe especially local news. Like, I don't need to know the human interest story. I don't need to know about the kid who was hit by a car a block down. I don't need to know about the surface level of some actors in a new movie. Like, I don't want TV news. And I'm surprised Casey's watching it, but my parents watch it, and I encourage them heavily, stop watching television news. Because putting aside Fox, right? Television news seems very much like the old SNL skit where they're telling old people the robots are going to steal their medicine. Like, it's all about what's going to kill you, what terrible thing is happening. It's like it's clickbait before there was clickbait. It is so incredibly hyped up and sensationalized, telling you about all the things that you should be worried about. And it's not the things you should be worried about. It is a bunch of other crap. And it's just like, don't subject yourself to that. You don't need to know that. Don't get all hyped up about the killer bees that are coming into your neighborhood. Like, I always wonder if there was an actual story that people needed to know about. Like, it would just be mixed in with all the other crap on local news and given equal weight to, like, the dog that was loose that the police shot that had rabies, right? It's exactly the same. So anyway, I don't watch TV news.
In conclusion.
Yeah. And a little bit on the Fox News things. I get where you're coming from, Casey, but my advice would be that even if you're watching it with that in mind, constant exposure to extreme propaganda can't help but shift your thinking merely through repetition. Like the Overton window, right? Like, yeah, you think it's all lies and it's all BS and you're not falling for it and so on and so forth. But the constant repetition eventually gives the propaganda more weight than it deserves in your mind when you balance it against the truth, right? It's not much you can do to stop. It's just human nature. Like, it's not much you can do to stop that. You will come to think that the positions staked out there are slightly more reasonable than they are just by hearing it all the time. And it's the same stuff that all sorts of, the personalities and the jokes, and you become familiar with the people and so on and so forth. Even if in your rational mind, you're like, well, this is all BS and I'm learning about the enemy. It does have an effect on you in that manner. If you're aware of the effect, you could probably counteract a little bit, but it is a thing. So I feel like by now you should know all you need to know about how Fox works and be able to understand the people who are into it. And I would encourage you to stop watching it as well. But I would also encourage you to stop watching all the other TV news. Anyway, to answer this simple question, Twitter is still the main place where I get all my news. I have a very carefully selected group of people that I follow. And, I'm, 20 degrees separated from the actual thing, but I trim that list to the point where the things that come through on my feed are the things that I actually want to hear about personally. And if someone is, if I'm getting information that I don't want to hear about, I will trim that off. If I'm not getting information that I think is important or I'm getting it too late, I will add a follow by looking at a follow of a follow of a follow to see how something got to me. Twitter is how I do it. Before Twitter, I used RSS. Before RSS, I typed in the names of websites or used bookmarks. And before that, I guess we were back in the bad old days of TV news. But I never watched TV news as like, now it's time for me to watch the news. It was just that sometimes it was on in the house that I was in. That's as close as I got.
Yeah, I saw a lot of TV news growing because I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house, and they would always have news on every night. Like, and you'd frequently see like multiple newses, because you'd see like, first the local one, then the national one, whatever. Like, so you'd see like 3 or 4 news programs in a row sometimes. Like, so I saw a lot of TV news growing up, and I totally stopped watching it, after I, stopped going over there as a kid all the time. And so now I only ever see it if it's like, on a TV somewhere that I have to wait, like, an office somewhere, like a doctor's office, something like that.
It was the airport. Like when they have news on at the airport, I can't stand it, because like you can't escape it. Like I just want to put on noise canceling headphones to not hear the news. Like,
yeah, exactly.
My hatred for television news in all forms, every station, everything. Like maybe it's not rational, but I really hate TV news. I really hate it.
Yeah, because like now, like the few times I see it now, because I've been away from it for so long, but I had such a strong history of it before that. Like now when I see it, it's like hitting a raw nerve. It's because it's the same garbage now that it was 20 years ago. Like,
I feel like it's worse. It was like in the days when I grew up, at least, the network news had a certain boring staidness that does not exist in any television news anymore. Like they could get away with it because they were networks and they were monopolies, and news was isolated from entertainment, and there was all sorts of factors allowing them to essentially not give in to market forces that inevitably lead them down to the television equivalent of clickbait. So that did exist. It is much worse now than it was.
Yeah, that's true. But I it's still, though, like it was never good. It was just merely okay before, and now it's truly awful. And when you see it, when you're away from it for a while, and then you see it, you realize quite how horrendously bad it really is. And so, yeah, I strongly suggest, Casey, regardless of what viewpoints you want to develop or understand, TV news of any sort from any provider is horrible and is a bad way to get those viewpoints or any information whatsoever. And just ultimately, I would recommend, and maybe you don't want to do this, but I strongly encourage people who get a lot of anxiety or depression about everything horrible that's going on in the world, step back from it. It feels like you're giving up, or it feels wrong in some way to like take a break from it and ignore it or close yourself off from it. But the reality is that there's always going to be, much of this applies to Twitter too. There's always going to be more to read. There's always going to be more news. There's always going to be various, news publishers and various media trying to get your attention with new breaking developments of whatever. And most of it doesn't matter at all like a day later. It's like junk food for information. Like you're just like throwing junk food into your brain, and it feels like you're being useful or productive or a responsible citizen or informing yourself, but a very low percentage of that is actually useful and necessary to know and has lasting value. So number one thing is to cut out TV sources, because they literally will just air constant updates to nothing all day long because they don't want you to tune out, and there's always something to watch. What you should do instead is more of get away from like the push models, go to like a pull model where like you don't just sit there receiving what everyone's sending you. Like when you want to learn about something that you hear about through some other way that isn't a news show, go try to learn about it. Like if you hear about some new crisis or natural disaster that's happening, go look it up and try to find information about it then. But like get yourself off the feed, off the constant cycle, whether that's a Twitter feed or constantly refreshing news websites if anybody still does that, or a Facebook feed if anybody, God forbid, still does that, or if or if it's watching cable news, or even just quote having it on. That's still on. It's still pouring garbage into your brain constantly. Like cut it off. Actually step away from it, and you will find, much like people find when they like take breaks from Twitter for a while, you'll find that you don't miss as much as you think you will miss. Like major events that happen, you still hear about. Major things that you need to know, you still learn about. And you just remove this massive source of distraction and just constant anxiety and constant, because they're trying to rile you up. That's how they make more money from you. They rile you up so you keep watching and you stay engaged and you spread it around. Like if you just take yourself out of that system, it's way happier on the outside. And it's not, the world doesn't become perfect, but you can at least have a better mental state about it.
plus they have the ads, like, because news tends to be less valuable if it's not live. So you actually have to allow the ads to play, which is a little bit, in this ad free world. Like today, you have so many choices for news today, so much more than you did in the days when it was just newspapers and television and radio. Like the entire internet is there. There's lots of places where you can get news stories in the form that you want them or whatever. If you like TV news, some people, I'm just saying it's not for me. Some people like that type of thing and don't get anxiety from it. But very often, especially if you're the type of person who grew up watching television news or grew up having television news on, you just continue to do it out of habit. And like, that's the thing to question. And to defend Casey's Fox News stuff for a second, I think it actually is important to know what Fox News is and how it works and not just take other people's words for it. I just don't think you need to, like, for the rest of your life, watch one Fox News show a day or a week. Like, I think you can get it after a fairly short period of time. Like, and check in every once in a while. Like, but it is important to know the enemy, like to know what the hell's going on over there. It's not important to watch it every day for years and years and years. Like, you'll get it pretty quickly. It's, it's a hell of a thing.
Are we satisfied now?
As much as we will be.
Probably won't be satisfied until television news is destroyed in all forms.
Ooh, man.
Just wait. It's aging out.
All right. So Stephen Kim wants to know, I'm in my final semester of college/university and wanted to know if you guys had some sort of senior project. And if so, what was it? I did not. When I went to Virginia Tech, I did not have any sort of senior thesis project or anything like that. I did do some fun things, but no, I did not have a senior project. John, how about you?
I did have a senior project. Everyone had to do one. It was in the engineering school. I was majored in computer engineering, which is like a hybrid of electrical engineering with a couple of CS courses thrown in, essentially. My particular project was, I don't even remember how we came out with this, but it was a local area paging system. Yes, pagers were a thing. Yes, I'm old. Local area paging system and software. There was a contest they had at the school where you'd have to like, kind of one of those things where you get like a bucket of parts and you have to build a vehicle and the vehicles have to compete. Like you guys know about what I'm talking about, those engineering contest stuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's a really cool Nova episode about an MIT hill climb competition. It's like one of the favorite things I ever watched as a kid. I should find the link for next week. Anyway, they have these contests and the project, it's contrived, it's a senior project, whatever, was to make a system of pagers, sort of like the restaurant pagers, where each team would have a pager, and when it was their turn to come and compete, you would page them. And then there was, you do this through a piece of software, and then the software also kept track of the matches, and then they would compete, and you would, start the timer for the match. Like the software ran the officiating for the match and recorded the results, right? So you'd basically run the competition sitting in front of a PC, and the PC was connected through a parallel port to a radio transmitter, and the radio transmitter would talk to the pagers. So the project was, we made the pagers, we made the radio transmitter, and we made the software. And we had to price out all the components and source them. And it was actually a pretty good project that spanned hardware and software. In the end, the part I did was the entire Windows program written in MFC and C++.
Oh, God, I'm so sorry. It's no wonder you hate Windows so much.
And then I printed it at the end and handed it in. Here's the software, here's a floppy disk, and here is a beautifully commented printout of the world's most heinous MFC code.
How could you even tell it's the most heinous? All MFC code was heinous.
It was the first and last time I ever did Windows development.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Marco?
Well, this ties around nicely to the beginning of the show. I did have a senior project. It was required by my college for everybody. And it was... So I was in computer science, and what I chose to do was attempt to develop my own audio compression algorithm. And not dynamics compression.
Oh, you've spoken about this. That's right.
But compressing the way MP3 compresses to make files smaller. And the idea I had was, you have you look at audio waveforms and you see basically a bunch of squiggly lines. And my idea was, instead of storing every number on that line, maybe I can fit a least squares best fit line to it, and then simply store the coefficients of the least squares equation, and have that represent 20 audio samples with 4 coefficients. And I mentioned earlier, I have a very limited understanding of things like digital signal processing and signal theory. Well, I had way less of an understanding of it, 20 years ago or whatever that was. So not 20, I guess 15 years ago. And so I had a very bad understanding of it then. And so my idea to make this, best curve fit algorithm as audio compression not only was hilariously slow to run on my Pentium 3 of the day, but was, AMD Athlon of the day. So it was hilariously slow to run, and also made the files larger because it was so bad at compressing. And at first I tried lossy compression. That sounded so horrible compared to MP3 and made bigger files much more slowly. Then I tried lossless compression, figuring, well, if I can at least store the coefficients, and then I can just store the difference values between, what my crazy equations predicted and the actual values, that's at least smaller numbers and they can take up less space. So I tried lossless compression then, and that was also horribly slow and also made the files larger than the input waves. And so what I ended up having to pivot to, since I was already deep into this project and couldn't really come up with a new thesis, was basically turn it into a survey of lossless audio compression algorithms. And it turned out all that crazy work I had done to generate best fit curves and with least squares algorithms and everything, turns out if you just predict that one sample will be the same value as the one before it, and then just store the difference as the smaller number, that is basically free to do on computers. It takes no time and compresses almost as well as FLAC, because FLAC is doing things like that. And it turns out lossless audio compression basically always maxes out at around 50% compression for constant input types like music, and pretty much any predictor that you use to generate sample-to-sample data works at about the same accuracy. It's pretty hard to get it much worse than that. So that is what I did. I made a survey of audio compression algorithms to show how efficient all these much simpler methods were than the one that I tried first that took me months.
You could have done your graduate thesis on run length encoding.
Yeah.
It's too soon. He's still a little upset about his C code from earlier to this episode. Tobo Granite, I think, would like to know, John, what Destiny videos and specific YouTubers, perhaps, do you watch?
This is short. I'm always on the lookout for new things, but I have two favorite YouTubers. My favorite YouTuber is named True Vanguard. I think his actual name is Ryan. I like him because he talks a lot about PvP, which is a type of Destiny game that I like. It's player versus player as opposed to player versus environment, or player versus enemies, PvE. Talks about PvP a lot, and he is, I don't know how to put this. He's a grown-up. I mean, they're all adults on YouTube for the most part, but he doesn't, I maybe describe it by what he's not. He doesn't yell all the time, which is the thing the kids like. They like it when people react very dramatically to whatever is going on in the thing they're doing. So he's not a yeller. I was going to say that he doesn't curse, but that's I don't care about cursing. But indicative of how sort of pleasant and mature and kind and not interested in sensationalism or getting super angry about things. He just generally seems like a nice person. He's also a dad, right? So I'm watching a dad video, right? He's really good at PvP. And he explains what he's thinking, how he does things, stuff that he tried in a nice laid back way that I find interesting. So True Vanguard on YouTube, my number one YouTuber. My second favorite one is named Dado. I don't actually know what his real name is. He is younger. He's a little bit more potentially prone to anger. He struggles with the fame that he has gotten by being a fairly popular Destiny YouTuber, but he does PvE a lot. And so I want to learn about all the PvE things and the intimate details and all sorts of stats about what's the best thing to bring into this. I tried out all these different techniques and hear all the numbers and the math and all that stuff. And I occasionally enjoy watching him struggle with himself and with the game and with all sorts of other things. To give an example, when they released a new raid recently, it's a race between all the players to see who can be the first one to finish it, right? And Dado's right in there because, he's a pretty big YouTuber in the Destiny world, and he's got a lot of friends, and he's good at that part of the game, and so are his friends. So it's a 6-person thing of players versus, computer enemies trying to finish the raid, see who can be the world's first. You get a big, accolades from it from the game maker, and they all stream on Twitch, right? Dado and his crew were not the world's first. They came in third or fourth. They started playing when the raid was launched. There was a bunch of stuff for like everyone who finishes the raid on the first day, you'll get like this free jacket and all sorts of swag or whatever. Even if you're not the world's first, just everyone who finishes the raid on the first day, you get all this stuff. Dado and his crew played the raid for slightly over 24 hours straight.
Oh my word!
Like it was like 2 minutes and 30 seconds over the 24-hour mark. So basically, they sat down there, they started playing the raid, and they played it for 24 hours. I watched them on and off. I went to sleep. I woke up. They were still playing. This was like over the course of a weekend. I checked in an hour later. They were still playing. After the world's first had already completed, many, many hours after, they were still going. They knew they weren't going to be the world's first. They were still going. This is on Twitch, not on YouTube. But and you're watching them, and it's kind of like when you watch someone like doing something where you're like, just go to sleep. Like you're not going to get any better. You're not going to get any sharper. Like I continue to think that if they had taken a 6-hour break in the middle, they would have finished the game. They would have finished the raid faster. Like if they had just gotten some sleep, because after 24 hours of intense concentration on a game, very difficult. Like it's not like they're just casually doing this. This is like the most difficult top level thing that you can do. They were under leveled for it. They're concentrating for 24 hours. You are fried. You're not doing, they were making dumb mistakes and getting sloppy. Like they should have taken a 6. Anyway, that drama, and just to see that person who I've known since the Destiny 1 days and like struggle with that and be frustrated with their failures, but eventually to overcome, was an amazing dramatic moment in the world of Destiny videos. And I was glad I was there intermittently to witness it. So those are my 2 ones. True Vanguard, my number 1, Dado number 2. There's a bunch of other ones I look at Planet Destiny sometimes. Erex, Cacus, they all have these crazy names. But those are my top 2. So I would highly recommend everyone check out True Vanguard and check out Dado if you're into PvE and you can handle his occasional outbursts.
So Casey, who are your favorite Destiny YouTubers?
Oh, I love all of them, Marco. I can't choose just one.
All the great YouTubers.
Thanks to our sponsors this week, Away, Squarespace, and Fracture. And we'll see you next week.
Now the show is over. They didn't even mean to begin, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research. Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Twitter, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA Syracuse. It's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech podcast so long.
Did we ever do the dark patterns in Destiny? We haven't, right?
Can you handle more Destiny?
Well, do I have a choice?
Do you guys know what a dark pattern is?
No.
Like in UI design?
That's the context that usually comes up. And Marco, why don't you explain what a dark pattern is?
So if we're talking about the same thing, a dark pattern like in UI design is basically, it's almost like designing something intentionally to trick or mislead the user into doing something that's kind of bad for them, but that benefits you as the designer, or as the owner. So like a good example of this would be like on a website, like really hiding like the way to delete your account, or really hiding the way to call them on the phone if you need help with something. Like trying to make it really hard to do something that will, that kind of costs you, the owner, money that might benefit people, or like making it easy to like accidentally trick people into like giving up their email address to your mailing list or stuff like that.
Yeah, and it's called a dark pattern because patterns in general is like, a construct that you use in an interface, like, sort of standard constructs, an arrangement of controls where you tend to see like a text box with a checkbox underneath it, or like, sort of those are patterns of just like familiar ways to present interfaces to people. A dark pattern is a pattern, as Marco said, that is nefarious purposes. A great example of this, setting aside computers entirely, the concept of fine print. Fine print is a dark pattern, predating computers. If you have something that you have to put like on a box or in a contract or whatever, and you can make the text really, really small because you really don't want the person, like you have to put it there, but you really don't want the person reading that. So you make it really, really small to try to discourage them from, maybe they can't see it that well. Maybe it's so small they're squinting and it's annoying to read. That's a dark pattern. And in the computer days, another one that comes to mind as a sort of the canonical dark pattern is the please send me your newsletter checkbox that is checked by default. That was like one of the early dark patterns on the web, right? Where you're going through some sign up process and there's a checkbox that says, yes, please send me marketing material. And it's checked by default. 100% a dark pattern. And by the way, if you make an error in the form and like, oh, your email, you forgot to enter your phone number and you uncheck that checkbox, it's checked again when the form comes back. That's also a dark pattern.
Yep.
So now that we've established what a dark pattern is, this is about dark patterns in Destiny. This was a very sad day for me in Destiny. This I don't think was intentional, so maybe I can't list it as dark. Well, actually it was intentional, but yeah. All right. Anyway, Destiny has vendors where you can buy things. And the way the system has worked since Destiny 1, Destiny 2 is there's a bunch of squares on the screen. You put your cursor over them, and you press a button, and you buy it. It's not like a cart. You don't put things into a cart. And there's no quantity. Like you can't say, give me 5 of these, 10 of these. Like there's no place where you get to enter a number or hit an up and down arrow to put numbers. If you want to buy something, you hover over it and you hit the button. And not only do you hit the button, occasionally you have to hold down the button for a certain period of time because some actions have big consequences. Like maybe something is very expensive, or like there's a button you hold down to dismantle items that you have. And if it's a very valuable item, you want to, they put in a delay so that, oh, you're going to disassemble this thing that took you a year to get. You have to hold down the button for like 60 seconds, like in this big progress bar fills, to make sure you don't accidentally delete it, right? Because lots of stuff you're deleting all the time. You get junk in the game and you're just like, oh, delete, right? So those are short, but the more consequential the action, the more you hold it down. But anyway, for vendors, for buying things, for the most part, it's, they're fairly fast. You hold down the button a little bit. Sometimes you just tap it, but it's just a single press because there is no quantities anywhere. And sometimes you want to buy 50 of something because there are consumable items and you want to buy a bunch of these things and you're going to trade for those things. This whole economy, economy of materials and made up money and everything in the game. And you buy them in large quantities. So the habit over the course of, since Destiny 1, 4 years now or whatever, is you go to a vendor and you're like, okay, I'm going to buy 5 of these things and 10 of those and 8 of those. And I'm going to go to this vendor and sell 5 of these and disassemble that and put these into the, and so you get used to hitting the button in sequences. So you look at the price, you look at how much you have, and you're like, oh, those are 10, it's not, they don't use dollars, but those are $10 each. I've got $500. I'm going to buy 5 of those. You go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm like, all right, I got this much left. I'm going to buy 2 of those. They're 20 each, 1, 2, 3. Like that's what the game has trained us to do over the course of 4 years. If you played from the beginning of Destiny, that's how everything works. In Destiny 2, in the latest expansion, there was a vendor who sold an item that is an incredibly short supply in the new economy. And they're probably going to patch the game to fix this. Particular item that, a material, a resource that is very rare, and there's no reliable way to get more. You get a little bit more randomly, but not enough to feed what you would want to use this item in. And a vendor would sell it. And they sold it for 10 of a very fairly valuable other item. Like it's not currency, but like there's another resource that's pretty rare and hard to get, but there is at least a reliable way to get it. They sold it for 10 of those. And you're like, oh, I'm not going to spend 10 of that very valuable resource for one of these things. That's not a good deal. But eventually, as it became clear in the economy that there was no other way to get them, you're like, well, I would love any opportunity to buy these. So I'm just going to farm that other material, come back here and buy, I know they're 10 each, so fine, I'll get 100, and then I can buy 10 of those things, right? So you go out, you farm that material, or maybe like me, you have a massive surplus because that material was in abundance before the expansion. I had a pretty big surplus.
Found it in the attic.
Yeah. Like I've got this cache of stuff. I'm going to spend it. Even though it's like 10 to 1, it's not a good deal. It's the only way I have to get this stuff. So I need to buy some of this stuff. And so I go to the vendor And I buy a couple of them, and I'm like, oh, that really hurt. That sucked. And I wait for the next week for the reset to see if the price changed. It didn't. It's still 10 of those things. I'm like, all right, well, let me just bite the bullet. Let me go farm a whole bunch of this stuff, and let me just go and just dump it all in. I'll buy like, 20 of those things, right? I'm just going to do it. Like I've resigned myself to my fate. They're not going to fix the economy for a while. So I go there and I buy like 20 of them, and I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and I'm hitting the button, right? And eventually the button stops working and the icon grays out. I'm like, what the hell? I had literally 1,000 of this thing, and they were 10 each, right? I could have bought a ton of them. Like there were 10 each, and I've got over 1,000. Why is the button disabled? Is there a limit that a number I can buy per week or something? And I realized the reason the thing was disabled is because every time I purchased one, the price doubled.
Oh no. Oh no.
And because the game had trained me, when you want to buy 10 of something, go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, hit the button 10 times. Like, you're not looking down at the price to see if the price is changing. The price never changed on any other item when you bought it until this thing. The reason I couldn't buy anymore is because I no longer had enough to buy a single one. The next purchase was like 600 or something. It was some huge amount, right? Like, or I suppose it had to be a power of 2, right? I didn't have that much left anymore. But that's why it wasn't letting me purchase it. So essentially, I bought one of these consumables for like 512 of that other one before the thing stopped. So I burned through like a year's worth of this very valuable consumable that I had built up in like 30 seconds. No, there is no undo. There is no going back. There is no complaining to Bungie that you accidentally did a bad thing. There was no delay. An example of a dark pattern would be a price that doubles every time you buy one that is unprecedented in 4 years of the game, and an interface that does not let you buy things in quantities and let you preview the price. The game had trained me, press the button a certain integer number of times and get your thing. I was sad for like 4 days about this because, I know it's all just pretend stuff, but I literally spent a lot of my actual time building up the inventory of that other valuable item. Notice how I'm not using all the crazy Destiny words here to help you people?
Yeah, I appreciate that.
It doesn't really help.
It was killer. And the thing is, it is a dark pattern because this vendor in the game is supposed to be like a gangster, and like every time you do any kind of deal with him, he always like welches on his deal, or he doesn't, like in the game world, it kind of makes sense, but it was bad. It was brutal. I complained about this on Twitter, and I got a whole bunch of people commiserating saying, yep, I did the same thing. So I wasn't the only one who got nailed by this. In some respects, like, that's a pretty good game. Like, you really felt like you were screwed by this criminal. It's like, yeah, but I did spend like a year of Destiny 2 building up that. And it's nothing compared to the people who play this game all day. Like, the YouTube people all have so much of every resource that it's ridiculous. But I don't. I'm a casual player. I play every once in a while, like, compared to the people who play, like, hours and hours a day. And this really hurt. And I said it on Bungie on Twitter, like, bad show, Bungie. Like, don't make the people who play your game feel bad. Like, I see what you were going for, but I think you underestimated exactly how dark this dark pattern was and exactly how trained people are to just hit the button 5 times and not look at the price.
To be fair, and just to show the listeners how annoyed you were by this topic has been sitting in the after show section of our show notes for like 2 months or something like that. And typically, if something sits for that long, John will just say, oh, it doesn't matter anymore, and move along. But not this, my friends. And I don't blame you, to be honest. That would really chap my behind. So did the item or whatever that you bought not as many as you expected of? Was it worth it? Like, what is the item good?
No, it was not worth it. Like, at 10 for one of these, it's not worth it. For like hundreds of that consumable item for one of them, it's a terrible deal. It's like someone said you can buy a candy bar for $10. You're like, maybe it's for charity. But if we said, oh, and by the way, go ahead and buy 20 candy bars and the price will double every time. By the time you're buying a candy bar for $1,000 and someone says, well, was it worth it? It was, you got that candy bar for $1,000. No, it was not worth it at all. It was terrible. I'm still sad about it. I shouldn't have put this topic here. Now I'm sad all over again.
All right, and just because people will ask, and this is the brief spoiler moment of the episode, what did you have to spend in order to purchase what using the actual Destiny terminology?
They were selling, this is going to sound so ridiculous, they were selling masterwork cores for legendary shards. Legendary shards are legendary shards got it from disassembling legendary weapons and a bunch of other things. Masterwork cores used to randomly drop, or used to be able to get them from disassembling Masterwork weapons, which would randomly drop. Anyway, Masterwork cores are incredibly rare in Destiny 2. And in the Forsaken expansion, they changed the infusion economy to require all sorts of materials to do infusion. So basically, I mean, they have the charts in this. This is why they're going to adjust it. They changed the infusion economy such that people used to do infusion all the time. And as soon as Forsaken came out, I bet the rate of infusion dropped off a cliff because it basically became nobody ever infused anything. It used to be a thing that you would do all day long. And it was like nobody infused anything because it uses so many resources, including Masterwork cores, and there's no way to get more Masterwork cores. So even if you had a cache built up, eventually you depleted it. I bet like infusion has dropped to practically zero. So they're going to fix this. They're going to adjust it. They posted a bunch of stuff about it a couple weeks ago about how they're going to provide some reliable way to get Masterworks cores. I still think it's kind of crappy. I still think making infusion this expensive makes people run around with a bunch of hobo suits, to use Incredibles parlance, when really I just want to use my good items, but I can't afford to infuse them. Anyway, all that made sense to Destiny people. Rest assured.
Is this how our show sounds to like non-programmers or non-nerds? Like when I was going through all my audio stuff earlier, I'm sure a lot of our audience like zoned out or skipped the chapter. Like, consider myself like appropriately gotten back at for that now.
Legendary shards and Masterwork cores are probably a little bit more ridiculous than ring buffers, but not much. I was asking in the chat room, would it have squared if you had bought it one at a time or one AA time? You could only buy one at a time. That's my point. You can only buy one at a time.
So if you would like left the store or something and come back.
It reset. I think it reset per day. So if you cranked up the price, if you went to sleep and came back the next day, it would be back down to 10. So you can buy one a day for 10, but like it's ridiculous. Like you need like 3 of them to do a single simple infusion, and it cranks up from there.
Yeah, I got lost again.
Yeah. It's a complicated game, folks.
I can't believe we made it through that though. This is a new record for us, I think, of how much Destiny we can make it through at once.
All right, well, anyway, if that was your question, yeah, it resets on a daily basis, which is way too slow. Like, and I have been going back and buying one for 10, but at a certain point, like once they said they were going to change the economy, I'm not even buying one for 10 anymore because one a day is ridiculous anyway. And I got to travel all the way to the vendor, and I hate that guy now.
Yeah, on principle.
Yeah, he screwed me.
I'm surprised you didn't do more pre-purchase research. You research every other purchase in your life to such a degree. Like, if you're making a large Destiny purchase,
that's why I tweeted it. I didn't don't make the same mistake that I did. Right? I mean, because it was just so unprecedented. Like, when would you ever need to look back at the price? The price is the price, and then you go buy. Like, for 4 years we've been doing that. Never has something changed price when you bought one. It's madness. Let alone doubling. That's just so cruel.
I wonder if I could do a reverse ramp for the...
Yeah. So I know what you've been doing while Destiny Chat was happening.
I haven't been programming, but I've been thinking about it. I've been like slowly like noodling on this throughout the entire show. Like whenever I wasn't busy talking or anything, like I would like get an idea in my head, like, oh, what if I do it this way?
Take 2 showers tomorrow.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Shower is the ultimate idea place.
Nice.
Yeah, I think I might do a reverse buffer for the multiplier. That might work better.
I continue to think that there are probably libraries in straight C that do this.
The thing is, like, to do it right, it's probably only like 50 lines of code. Doing a very simple limiter without look ahead is like 10 lines of code. Like this is not difficult stuff, or it isn't complicated. It's just really tricky. If that makes sense. Like there's a difference between like tricky and like it's not complicated. The solutions are very simple once you get them. But to figure out exactly what to do with these crazy numbers and how to do it is very tricky. It's the kind of thing that like I start out with a few lines of code, doesn't work right. Then I like slowly bloat it up with a whole bunch of crazy crap. And then eventually I figure out something that works. And then I end up then pruning that back down, deleting all the stuff I didn't actually need. It's crazy. And none of it would be helped by test suites.
No, a lot of it would be.
Nope.
No, you really would. Don't even try to talk shit about stuff you don't understand.
Because you break the problem down. You'd break the problem down into easily testable functions, and you'd get each of those working, so you didn't have to worry about them anymore. And then you'd build up. That may not be your way of working, but rest assured, it is a way of working that does work for this specific case.
What I am doing is one of those functions. Like that's all it is. Like it's a very, very small function.
Right, but if you know what the output's supposed to look like making tests to show what the output is, and like your aspirational state as your failing test, we're not going to pitch you a new test. It would work okay for this. It's just not how you're working. It's fine.
But the debugger works too.
You use the debugger in the test. Forget it.
This is killing me. I can't do this. I need to, if we're going to have this conversation, I'm going downstairs and pouring a drink, because I cannot have this conversation sober.
We've covered these bases before. I'm not trying to convert you.
You set a breakpoint and you can see what all the values are.
Oh my God.